Novel Empire. Immortal God of Battle. Chapter 441 Slightly Inferior. Xiang Nan waved his right hand and the giant saber in his hand let out a dull sound. Zheng. So you used a knife. Sima Nantian smiled faintly and raised his right leg high. My leg skill is unparalleled in the world. Xiang Nan's body trembled and he immediately refined his qi into electricity. The intense lightning crackled and enveloped his entire body, causing his yuan qi strength to soar to a new height. Sima Nantian's right leg trembled, and a ring of wavy clouds began to move up and down on his body. Xiang Nan took a step forward and slashed down with his giant saber, directly forming the third stance of the Yang Flame Saber technique. A huge Yang Flame blade light shot towards Sima Nantian in the shape of a crescent moon. Sima Nantian leapt into the air and jumped half a meter high. Then, he twisted his waist and swept out with a swing of his leg. With the help of his body's spinning speed, he instantly spun around more than 10 times in the air, and his leg swept out a black cloud-like yuan qi, condensing an arc-shaped strong light. The arc-shaped light collided with the Yang Flame blade light, causing an earth-shattering explosion. Protect little sister. Sima Nantian took the time to shout. Chu Yu and the others had already surrounded Dream Butterfly. The four of them simultaneously released their yuan qi and condensed an eggshell-shaped yuan qi shield to surround Dream Butterfly. After the Yang Flame blade light collided with the arc-shaped strong light, it was because the explosion was too violent that black smoke rose into the sky. The top of the black smoke began to roll, and the black smoke below continued to rise, forming a huge mushroom cloud. In such a violent explosion, Sima Nantian bowed slightly and said, "Cloud stepping steps." His right foot heavily touched the ground. The yuan qi beneath his feet exploded, forming a small black cloud. With a whoosh, his body rushed towards Xiang Nan at an astonishing speed. This cloud stepping step was extremely fast. In Xiang Nan's eyes, it had already turned into a dotted line. The so-called martial artist's speed, as fast as the afterimage of a dotted line, was all relatively fast. Back then, when Xiang Nan saw spread out draw his sword, the sword light was like a shadow. That was because Xiang Nan's realm was too low. But now, if Xiang Nan saw spread out draw his sword again, he would be able to see it clearly without any shadows. Even though Xiang Nan was at the 5th level of origin return, seeing that Sima Nantian's body was still as fast as a shadow, it could be seen how astonishing Sima Nantian's speed was. Xiang Nan's entire body was wrapped in lightning as he slashed towards Sima Nantian's shadow. Sima Nantian rotated twice and slashed down at Xiang Nan with his fierce whip leg. The blade and whip leg collided violently. The lightning was shot upwards, while Xiang Nan was pushed back more than 10 meters by the force of this kick. It's not possible. Xiang Nan's heart skipped a beat. His dragon blood saber was a high-grade earth-grade weapon. Sima Nantian could fight against his dragon blood saber with just his flesh and blood without losing. Who could have such a strong flesh and blood body? If that was the case, then why would a martial artist need weapons? Cloud stepping steps. Sima Nantian did not know what Xiang Nan was thinking. After forcing Xiang Nan back with one kick, he sprinted forward again. Xiang Nan sliced, swept, and tilted the 2.5-meter-long saber, using it as sharp as the wind. Sima Nantian's 2 legs took turns attacking. Every time his pair of long legs slashed down, it would be as fast as a gust of wind and rain. The two of them fought more than 20 times in a row. After fighting each other several times, Xiang Nan was knocked back by the shock, while Sima Nantian was reluctant to part with him. So strong. Xiang Nan clenched his teeth and felt that Sima Nanshan's every kick was like a small mountain pressing down on his saber. Mo pointed. The moment Xiang Nan slashed down with his saber and collided with Sima Nanshan's heavy leg, his left thumb pointed towards Sima Nanshan's face. A beam of flame shot towards Sima Nanshan's face. Cloud shaking hands. Sima Nantian swung his left hand to the side, and a white cloud wrapped around his palm. The white cloud was soft, and it actually wrapped around the flaming light beam, pushing it to the left. Immediately after, Sima Nanshan's right hand turned into a hand knife and sliced into Xiang Nan's left wrist, forcing Xiang Nan's Mo to stop. Flower picking finger. Xiang Nan grabbed Sima Nanshan's right hand with his left fingers and flipped it upwards to restrain Sima Nanshan's right hand. Sima Nanshan's body was pulled forward abruptly, and he only needed Xiang Nan to make up for it with a saber to decapitate him. Black cloud suppression. Sima Nanshan's reaction was incomparably swift. Suddenly, a ring of black clouds appeared above his head. The black clouds instantly enveloped his body and mercilessly enveloped him. Sima Nantian was as heavy as a mountain and landed on the ground with a loud boom, making it impossible for the flower-picking finger to move. Xiang Nan's reaction was decisive. He stabbed the saber into the ground at close range and roared, "Azure Dragon, go out to sea." Boom! In an instant, Xiang Nan's entire body burned with flames. The flames enveloped the lightning and sent Sima Nan's zenith flying back. Sima Nantian raised his right leg to resist the blade of the Azure Dragon. He shouted, "Shake the cloud wings." On Empress Sima Nanshan's back, a pair of enormous white cloud-feathered wings suddenly appeared. These two wings were 30 meters long. The pair of cloud wings flapped nearly 100 times in an instant, bringing with it an unimaginable backlash. They actually carried Xiang Nan's Azure Dragon into the sea, forcing him to stop instead, and even pushing him backwards rapidly. However, the power of the giant wings was too fierce. After 100 flaps, it unexpectedly produced a fierce wind that was as sharp as a knife, shredding the countless trees behind him, leaving behind a fan-shaped ruin. As for Chu Yu and the others, along with Ming Yu Yuan, they were all sent flying by the strong wind from the flapping of their wings. Pull. Saber. Slash. The dragon blood saber in Xiang Nan's hand hummed as if it was a true dragon roaring. He had obtained an even more powerful pressure than the Azure Dragon going out to sea. This time, he pulled out his saber and slashed out, hacking out a 20-meter-long bolt of lightning origin energy saber light. Sima Nantian also lifted himself up to resist the dragon blood saber's right leg and fiercely raised it. Hoo! A 30-meter-long arc of light was raised by Sima Nanshan's heavy legs. The saber rays collided with the arc-shaped light and both flew into the sky. Yes! Sima Nan raised his right leg in the sky, raised his flying knife light, and took advantage of the situation to leave the ground. His right leg was still moving upwards, and his left leg had already used a move to pierce through Xiang Nan's heart leg, heavily stabbing him in the chest. At the same time, Xiang Nan used his middle finger to point at Sima Nantian with 3 fingers. Xiang Nan's middle leg, Sima Nanshan's middle finger, and the two of them rummaged backwards at the same time. Xiang Nan flipped backwards continuously and only stopped after he had flipped nearly 20 meters. He knelt on one knee, his face flushed red, and he coughed out a large amount of red blood. Sima Nantian stepped on the ground with both his legs and slid back more than 10 meters. Blood oozed out from the corner of his mouth. "It's not possible." The two of them said the same thing in a low voice. Sima Nan's face was filled with anger. "With my 6th level origin return realm, crushing a 9th level origin return realm martial artist is a piece of cake. You are only at the 5th level origin return realm, yet you actually have such strength. Xiang Nan held the huge saber in his hand and said in a deep voice, "What kind of mystery does that leg of yours have? It can actually collide with my saber without being cut off." Chapter 442 Fierce Battle. Sima Nantian was slightly stunned. What he was most concerned about was why Xiang Nan's strength was so deadly. This kind of strength should not appear on a 5th level origin returning cultivator. Xiang Nan was more concerned about Sima Nantian's right leg. Sima Nantian felt that he had lost to Xiang Nan. He seemed to care more about his strength than Xiang Nan, so he said angrily, "Why don't I show you?" As he spoke, Sima Nantian lifted the hem of his long shirt and rolled up his trousers. His leg was actually wearing a knee-length leg guard. The leg guard was fiery red, and there were several scales larger than a palm on it. Fire dragon? Xiang Nan was shocked. That thing was definitely the skin of a fire dragon. The flood dragon, also known as the flood dragon, was a high-level demonic beast. The so-called flood dragon was a hybrid dragon. The difference in strength between flood dragons was also very large. Some of the flood dragons had the ability to turn the sky upside down, while others were not much stronger than demonic beasts. Sima Nantian's leg guard was made from the skin of a fire dragon, and it could withstand Xiang Nan's dragon blood saber. Its grade was at least at the earth grade, high grade and above. It was very likely that it was still at the half-heaven grade. The so-called half-heaven grade was a weapon that was still at a high earth grade, but its mere sturdiness was already at the level of a heaven grade weapon. However, it did not possess the additional functions that a heaven grade weapon should possess. "Return the dream butterfly to me." When Xiang Nan saw Sima Nantian's leg guard, he wasn't so afraid. If Sima Nantian really used his flesh and blood to block the blade of the dragon blood saber, then it would be truly terrifying. "So her name is Meng Dai." Sima Nantian was overjoyed. "Brat." However, Chu Yu's expression changed drastically. With a cold face, she said, "Don't be shameless. My brother Sima is willing to play 2 moves with you because he thinks highly of you, yet you actually want someone." She grabbed Meng Dai's neck again, causing her face to turn red. She said coldly, "Brother Sima is the man I admire the most in my heart. He thinks highly of you, so you have to follow him. If you are willing to serve Brother Sima with me, I am willing to be a side room and give you the main room. If you refuse, don't blame my subordinates for being heartless. Ayu, don't do this." Sima Nantian hurriedly pleaded for mercy and said, "My Haoyue, don't scare Miss Dream Butterfly. Miss Meng Dai already knows that she is wrong. She will be my wife. When the time comes, we will be together in bed. Isn't she happy?" As soon as Chu Yu released her grip, Meng Dai immediately cursed, "Who wants to be your wife? You shameless scum. Smelly bitch, you don't know what's good for you." Chu Yu raised her hand to slap the dream butterfly. Sima Nantian flashed over and grabbed Chu Yu's hand, saying, Yu, be obedient. If you slap her like this, Miss Meng Dai will be beaten to death by you." "Aya, brother Sima." Chu Yu grabbed the corner of Sima Nantian's clothes and said in a greasy voice, "You haven't married her yet, but you've already started to protect her." Xiang Nan could not continue listening. This group of people were simply shitting their brains. Xiang Nan unsealed his hands, lightning wrapped around his fingers, and a little bird rushed down from the sky, transforming into a 10-meter-long lightning bird that rushed towards Sima Nantian. A moment ago, Sima Nantian could already feel the abnormal lightning fluctuations coming from behind him. When he turned around, Xiang Nan was forming the King Sparrow seal. What a rare martial skill! Sima Nantian frowned. He raised his right leg and his entire long leg stirred like the wind. It actually twisted out a horizontal A tornado. However, the A tornado was formed from condensed yuan qi, appearing like a white cloud. The little sparrow had already passed through the hand gesture of the King Sparrow seal and rushed out, bringing along a powerful force of thunder and lightning. However, the white cloud A tornado had just trapped the little bird inside. The little bird struggled hard in the A tornado. The lightning on its body shot everywhere. Dense thunder and lightning instantly pierced through the A tornado to the point that it was riddled with holes. Sima Nantian's palms were covered with a thick layer of white clouds, and he continuously slapped his thigh. The A tornado was constantly repaired. Sima Nantian didn't recover his legs until the lightning power on the little bird was completely exhausted, and he turned back into a little red bird and flew back to Xiang Nan. But at this time, Sima Nantian's face had already turned a little pale. It seemed that it was due to excessive consumption of yuan qi. "Brother Sima, take a rest," Chu Yu said worriedly. "Your martial skills are all explosive, consuming yuan qi too quickly. And you, little bastard." Chu Yu pointed at Xiang Nan's nose and angrily scolded, "You are not as good looking as Brother Sima, nor are you at a higher realm than Brother Sima. What are you pretending to be here for? What are you pretending to be? Are you crazy? What are you talking about?" Xiang Nan felt that the logic behind these ancient people's words was somewhat unbelievable. Xiang Nan took a deep breath and formed another seal with his hands. Thunder God Seal, complete. Xiang Nan stepped out and his body was suddenly wrapped in even more violent lightning, turning into a thunder god. The giant saber in his hand roared amidst the lightning. "You have a trump card, but I don't." Sima Nantian roared, "Misty Mountain God." Suddenly, a 10-meter-tall battle general condensed from black clouds appeared in the sky. The black cloud battle general descended from the sky with a huge saber in his hand and landed heavily on Sima Nantian's body. He shrunk into a thin black cloud and wrapped around Sima Nantian. At this moment, Sima Nantian was wearing a black cloud robe. The robe formed by the thick black clouds was incomparably elegant. It could be seen that the black clouds were still slowly flowing. Xiang Nan rushed forward, and the giant saber in his hand let out a roar of dragons as it slashed down. In an instant, lightning flashed, shining so hard that everyone was almost unable to open their eyes. As for Sima Nantian, he swept his leg. With this leg, the black cloud robe on his body suddenly condensed into a black cloud long leg that was 10 meters long. The black cloud's long leg slashed down with Xiang Nan's saber, heavily colliding with each other. Immediately, thunder roared violently, crazily piercing through the black cloud, sending Sima Nantian flying with lightning. Sima Nantian's black cloud long leg actually crossed this blade and fiercely kicked Xiang Nan in the chest, sending him flying as well. Sima Nantian struggled to get up, his muscles still convulsing. Xiang Nan, on the other hand, was lying on the ground. The kick on his chest almost shattered all of his internal organs in an instant. At this moment, he was already on the verge of losing his composure. Xiang Nan lay on the ground and raised his left hand. Boom! A fierce daylight descended from the sky and landed on Xiang Nan's body. Xiang Nan jumped up, his body covered in lightning, shrouded in sunlight, and he launched a long-distance attack towards Sima Nan's angel, the Azure Dragon. "You still have a trump card, so do I." Sima Nantian took out a hexagonal crystal stone and crushed it. A rainbow glow flew out of it. The rainbow clouds enveloped his entire body, turning him into a multicolored person. Cloud traversing ladder. Sima Nantian jumped into the air, his body spinning rapidly, and his right leg kicked 3 times towards Xiang Nan. Chapter 443. Meet an opponent at chess. With each kick, he kicked out a cone-shaped leg shadow. The leg shadow was colorful. 3 consecutive feet descended, and 3 enormous cone-shaped leg shadows collided back and forth, colliding with the azure dragon of Xiang Nan. Immediately after, Sima Nantian kicked again. Kicks after kicks, conical leg shadows continuously hit the leg shadows in front of them. The more these leg shadows were stacked, the more powerful they were. The azure dragon that Xiang Nan used the divine thunder seal and the quenching sun to explode out of the sea was actually blocked by Sima Nantian's cloud traversing staircase. Ah! Xiang Nan erupted with yuan qi in large quantities, and ferocious lightning interweaved with each other, tangling with each other as they soared into the sky. Sima Nantian roared. When he kicked out 12 kicks, his last kick rushed down and used both of his legs to kick the last conical leg shadow. Saber drawing slash. Xiang Nan raised his saber, and a 40-meter long sunny saber light, wrapped in dense lightning, rose up from the ground. Sima Nantian kicked the saber light, causing the scene to explode and an even bigger mushroom cloud to rise. Xiang Nan and Sima Nantian both fell backwards at the same time. Xiang Nan rolled more than 30 times in a row and was already covered in dust. He covered his chest and tried his best to suppress the chaotic yuan qi in his body. However, he was unable to suppress it. He opened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of red blood. Sima Nantian's legs trembled fiercely. With Chu Yu's help, he sat on the ground trembling. This person is so strong. Sima Nantian took a deep breath, but with a puff, he spat out a mist of blood. Miss Meng Dai, look at me risking my life for you. Don't you understand my heart? Sima Nantian was still thinking about women at this time. Xiang Nan had always wanted to find an opportunity to use lightning escape to take Dream Butterfly away, but Dream Butterfly was always surrounded by 4 people, making it impossible for Xiang Nan to find a starting point. If he forcefully used the lightning tribulation, it was very likely that the one he had knocked away was not Dream Butterfly, but one of Sima Nantian's martial brothers. At this moment, judging from the battle situation, Xiang Nan, who was at the 5th level of the Origin Realm, was obviously more seriously injured than Sima Nantian, who was at the 6th level of the Origin Realm. Meng Dai couldn't bear to see Xiang Nan in such a miserable state, so she shouted, "Stop fighting. Sima Nantian, I'll go with you. Let Xiang Nan go." Really? Sima Nantian was overjoyed. Xiang Nan looked at Meng Dai in shock. He noticed that there was a look of determination in Meng Dai's eyes. Through this period of time, Xiang Nan immediately understood Meng Dai's intentions. This woman was likely to commit suicide. It's not that easy to grab someone from my hand. Xiang Nan stood up abruptly and pointed at Sima Nantian with his fingers together. At this moment, a 10-meter tall Buddha standing phantom appeared. That's Sima Nantian was suddenly shocked. Phaseless tribulation finger. Xiang Nan pointed out and a black finger force instantly hit Sima Nantian. This time, Sima Nantian's realm descended straight to the 5th level of the Origin Realm, while Xiang Nan was in the 4th level of the Origin Realm. One more finger. Xiang Nan took a step forward and pointed out with his second finger. Sima Nantian was already dodging, but his realm had suddenly dropped by a level, causing his judgment of his speed to deviate slightly. This second finger was still hit by Xiang Nan. At this moment, both of them had become at the fourth level of origin return. Xiang Nan flipped his hand and pointed at Sima Nantian, who was at the early stage of the third level of the origin realm, while he was at the middle stage of the third level of the origin realm. Once the realm advantages of both sides changed, Xiang Nan immediately charged forward with his saber. Sima Nantian was shocked by the decline of his cultivation realm. He hurriedly raised his leg and kicked the dragon blood saber. However, at this moment, Xiang Nan was half a level higher than Sima Nantian, and he had actually slashed Sima Nantian to the ground with a single blade. Sima Nantian rebounded and was smashed into his chest by Xiang Nan with the hilt of his saber, causing Sima Nantian to spit out a mouthful of blood. "Why don't you go crazy again?" Xiang Nan gritted his teeth and his eyes turned red. "You are only at a higher realm than me, but what about now?" Sima Nantian's body suddenly crossed over and his legs swept toward Xiang Nan like shadows. Xiang Nan placed the giant saber on the right side and blocked the leg shadow. Clang 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 clang. The dozen or so kicks landed on the giant saber, producing a violent collision sound. Xiang Nan kicked Sima Nantian's chest with a heartless kick. The moment he kicked Sima Nantian flying away, Xiang Nan chased after him and slashed down with a slash of his saber. Pooh! The blade cut through Sima Nantian's left collarbone and cut out from his right crotch, slicing out a huge slanted knife wound in front of his chest. Sima Nantian let out a miserable scream, and his body flew out. He was almost cut in half by Xiang Nan's saber, and a large amount of blood mist was scattered in the air. "You dare to hurt my brother Sima!" Chu Yu was furious and immediately rushed towards Xiang Nan. As soon as Chu Yu left the formation, the encirclement formed by them towards the dream butterfly opened up a gap. Xiang Nan bent his body and carried the giant saber behind him. His body suddenly turned into a streak of black lightning and disappeared. The dream butterfly also disappeared. "Where is he?" Chu Yu screamed a few times and hurriedly went to help Sima Nantian. She panicked and said, "Brother Sima, how are you?" Sima Nantian was lying on the ground like a gossamer and said, "Wu Xiang tribulation finger is, it's true. Good brother, how are you?" Meng Dai panicked and pulled Xiang Nan's clothes to examine his injuries. Xiang Nan sat cross-legged in a daze and said, "I'm fine. I'm not fatally injured." They will soon realize that the phaseless tribulation finger cannot weaken their cultivation permanently. They will still be chasing after them at that time. That Sima Nantian is too strong, not to mention that he still has 4 junior brothers who haven't attacked. We are no match for them. Xiang Nan had never encountered such a powerful opponent. Even if they fought intensely in the joint exam, most of the reason was because Xiang Long's cultivation was 2 levels higher than Xiang Nan's. However, Xiang Nan's strength improved by leaps and bounds. Not only did he learn the Buddhist profound arts, he also mastered the Thunder God Seal. However, he was only 1 level behind the enemy, so he could only fight Sima Nantian without distinguishing between us. This does not differentiate between us, but Xiang Nan is at a disadvantage. That was to say, Xiang Nan was suppressed by Sima Nantian. This won't work. Meng Dai frowned. Although the martial skills you have learned are all very powerful, they do not conform to your lightning meridian's attributes, and they are unable to display their full might. Yes. Xiang Nan sighed. This was his biggest weakness. Although the Buddhist profound arts were powerful, they weren't created on the basis of the lightning meridian's talent. Then let's not attack the altar. Hurry up and flee to the next spacetime zone. Perhaps some ancient people from over 100,000 years ago possessed lightning meridian's talent. Perhaps you can find a lightning meridian martial skill. Meng Dai said. Xiang Nan shook his head. It's not that simple. Those people will definitely wait for us at the exit. The exit of the next spacetime zone was located in the first ring, which was also the core of the chain. As long as they were there, they would definitely be able to defend Xiang Nan. 80,000 years ago, the number one young genius of the Blue Tide continent was really not bragging. Xiang Nan took a deep breath, his heart heavy. Chapter 444 A New World. Good brother, I wonder if you've noticed. Dream Butterfly muttered, I always feel that this spacetime zone is strange. Xiang Nan nodded and said, the style of the first two floors is completely different from this one. All the traps on the first two floors are designed to stop us from moving forward. But this spacetime zone is different. Even if we don't break through the altar, we can still go around and directly enter the next level. So that's what you're thinking. Meng Dai smiled and said, I don't think the details are the same as you, but the direction is the same. Look at the altar here. As long as we pass through the altar, we can obtain artifact fragments. However, even if we pass through the strongest altar on this floor, we will only obtain fragments from forging intermediate heavenly weapons. What exactly does the previous master of this floor want to leave behind for us? Could it be that it's just for the sake of leaving behind the fragments of an intermediate heavenly weapon? Isn't this a bit too much of a joke? If we want a heavenly grade fragment, can we not obtain it in the outside world? Why must we come to the Devil Sea? At least the alchemist on the upper level has left behind his life's masterpiece, the fate-returning pill. However, the most powerful masterpiece of this level is the heavenly grade fragment. I don't believe that's the case. What you said makes too much sense. Xiang Nan thought so. That's why I feel that it's our descendants who are causing trouble. Meng Dai said, the first two floors might not have been that difficult, but it was getting harder and harder for the descendants. On the other hand, this layer is not so easy, but it is getting easier and easier by the descendants. I suspect that the altars we have broken through are not the real checkpoints of the Devil Sea. Xiang Nan used his lightning vision to look at the nearby altars. He discovered that the altars emitted a dazzling light that was so powerful that Xiang Nan couldn't understand it. When he was observing the altar, he discovered another interesting place. The ground here was also shining. Xiang Nan touched the ground and muttered, why does the ground shine? Could it be that mechanical beasts also emerge from the ground? Is it the ground? Or is there light beneath the ground? Meng Dai said. This sentence immediately woke Xiang Nan up. He said, it's very likely that it's below the ground. Maybe we can't make it to the first ring now, so why don't we go underground and take a look? As he spoke, Xiang Nan inserted the giant saber into the ground, then grabbed the dream butterfly with his left hand. He grabbed the giant saber with his right hand and used his Yuan Qi to activate the giant saber, causing the saber to spin rapidly. As such, the dragon blood saber rotated and drilled a vertical circular hole in the ground. Xiang Nan hugged the dream butterfly and jumped into the circular hole. He used his flower fingers to seal the hole in the ground above his head with mud. The surface of the ground was very deep, and Xiang Nan and the other two landed vertically. The dragon blood saber kept rotating beneath them and continued to dig. Xiang Nan felt as if he had fallen 300 to 400 meters deep into the hole that he had dug up. Only then did the dragon blood saber suddenly pop through the surface of the ground and was grabbed by Xiang Nan. Indeed, there is an underground world. Xiang Nan grabbed the dream butterfly and continued to fall down. He discovered that after passing through the surface of the ground more than 300 meters deep, he had already fallen into a dark and huge space. Guide the light. A ray of sunlight shone down, illuminating a large area. As Xiang Nan descended, he looked around, and what he saw in front of him shocked him incomparably. This was an ancient and dilapidated underground world. Looking around, the entire underground world was endless, silent, and hidden in the darkness for countless years. Before the two of them landed on the ground, Xiang Nan slapped out a palm at the ground, using the recoil force of Yuan Qi to slow down the speed of the fall, and then landed lightly on the ground. Although the illumination range was large, it had always enveloped Xiang Nan and was unable to illuminate further away. Dream Butterfly took out 10 moonstones and handed them to Xiang Nan. Xiang Nan threw the moonstones and threw them out side by side. Every 100 meters or so, a moonstone would fall. As a result, the 1,000-meter-long straight path had been completely lit up. What a spectacular sight! Dream Butterfly couldn't help but sigh as she looked ahead. This place was like an ancient battlefield, filled with tattered weapons thrown on the ground and human corpses in different locations. Apart from these items, there were also some items that were not found on the surface of the earth, and that were either broken or abandoned artifact forging furnaces. These furnace branches were everywhere. Some of them had already been damaged by the explosion, while others had been injured by someone using some weapon. Most of them had been kicked over and abandoned. Every time the two of them walked forward, they would see more and more weapons scattered on the ground. Xiang Nan casually picked up a sword and looked at it in his hand. This sword should already be mid-grade earth grade, but it was discarded because the sword blade shattered. Good stuff. Hurry up and put it away. If you go out in the future and melt the sword, you'll be able to obtain a lot of materials for the intermediate grade earth soldiers. Meng Dai hurriedly said. Xiang Nan put away his sword and continued walking. Along the way, nearly 90% of the weapons were spiritual and ordinary. It seemed that these weapons were forged by laymen and were not formed at all. Occasionally, however, Xiang Nan would still pick up earth weapons, with the highest number of elementary earth weapons, the second highest number of intermediate earth weapons, and the lowest number of high earth weapons. Xiang Nan had picked up 70 of these soldiers. Such a huge harvest made Xiang Nan overjoyed. Every time Xiang Nan passed by a moonstone, he picked it up and continued to throw it into the distance. The two of them had already tossed the moonstone 3 times and walked a total of 4,000 meters away. Only then did they realize that the terrain had changed. As they continued forward, the terrain began to slowly tilt upwards. The land beneath their feet was no longer mud, but stone steps. Altar. Xiang Nan's heart skipped a beat and he immediately recognized that he was already standing on an incomparably large altar. This altar was countless times larger than the small altars scattered on it. Its area covered almost the entire underground world. The place where they were standing was the first step of this gigantic altar. This staircase was not only long enough to extend to the limits of the left and right sides, but also to the two ends of the underground world. Moreover, it was incredibly wide. With just a glance, one could see that the width of a single step was about 1,000 meters. Beside the two of them, there were 2 rows of smelting furnaces. Nearly 80% of the forging furnaces were empty, and the remaining 20% were more than 100 furnaces. Dream Butterfly suddenly put her finger on her lips and whispered, "Look, there's someone in front." Xiang Nan followed Dream Butterfly's gaze and saw, as expected, a dazed figure standing quietly at the limit of the last moonstone's light. In this dark underground world, in this silent environment, a figure stood in the distance and silently looked at him. This feeling caused Xiang Nan to feel a layer of goosebumps. Who is it? Xiang Nan shouted sternly. But the figure remained motionless. Chapter 445 Smelting Furnace. Xiang Nan threw the 9 moonstones he had put away from the ground in a row, and the area behind them was engulfed by endless darkness. A row of moonstones was thrown 1,000 meters away, and the silent figure became clear. When Xiang Nan and the other 2 saw the figure, they said in unison, "Puppet." That thing was not a person, but a puppet. Moreover, it wasn't a puppet hand on the surface of the earth, but a human-shaped puppet. The humanoid puppet was carved to perfection, and even the surface of its body was dyed the color of human skin. Ha! I understand. This is the true altar on this floor. Meng Dai clapped her hands and smiled happily. Good brother, look at the situation here, can't you figure it out? This layer is not for us to obtain any artifact forging fragments, but for us to be taught the method of artifact forging. You see, these forging furnaces are clearly meant for us to forge our own weapons and defeat the puppets with our own weapons. That makes sense, but I already have a high-grade earth weapon, so I don't need to forge any weapons for the time being. Xiang Nan said happily. Meng Dai shook her head. About your weapon, we'll talk about it later. You go break that puppet first and see what he can leave for us. Xiang Nan walked over with his saber in hand, and the puppet lifted its head and looked at Xiang Nan. Holy shit, this guy has a weapon in his hand. Xiang Nan cried out. Dream Butterfly saw that the humanoid puppet was holding a bright sword. At this moment, the humanoid puppet had already rushed towards Xiang Nan, and 5 meters in front of Xiang Nan, it suddenly sliced out a sharp sword light. Xiang Nan used the dragon blood saber to block it. After the sword light hit the blade, it actually shook Xiang Nan backwards by 2 to 3 meters. This is too exaggerated. Xiang Nan was incomparably shocked. He could only feel his right hand trembling slightly. He hurriedly used his lightning photoelectric eyes to spy on the puppet's yuan qi fluctuations. This was even more inconceivable. Judging from the yuan qi fluctuations in the humanoid puppet's body, its yuan qi was actually exactly the same as Xiang Nan's. Xiang Nan immediately rushed forward and fought with the humanoid puppet. Dream Butterfly explained while observing from behind, if I'm not mistaken, the weapon in the hands of this humanoid puppet should have been forged by the owner of this layer. This puppet's yuan qi is intentionally suppressed to the exact same level as yours. Therefore, if you want to defeat him, you can only forge a weapon that is stronger than his. This is the true purpose of this layer's master. However, we can also play tricks. Although the strength of the humanoid puppet's yuan qi is the same as yours, it doesn't know any martial techniques. You can kill it first. Xiang Nan used a move of the Azure Dragon to attack the sea. The humanoid puppet used its sword lattice to block it, but in the end, it was still slashed in half by Xiang Nan's saber. After the puppet died, it was instantly reconstructed. The messy body parts gathered into a new puppet. Ah! Endless! Xiang Nan was shocked. If this puppet could be reconstructed all the time, how long would he have to fight to the end? However, the puppet did not continue to attack. Instead, it opened its stomach, took out a book from it, and threw it to Xiang Nan. Then, the puppet stepped aside. Xiang Nan was curious and took the book. There were a few words written on the book: Spiritual Grade Weapon Forging Technique Beginner Grade. This is a tool forging technique. Xiang Nan held the book in his hand and asked in surprise, "Do you want me to forge my own weapon from this book?" As he spoke, he subconsciously looked at the smelting furnace beside Meng Dai. "Your guess is correct." Meng Dai nodded and said, "Now tell me about your saber." I don't know where your saber came from, but I've been observing your battles. I've discovered that your saber's help to you is actually very small. Your saber does have the hardness of a high-grade earth weapon, but the grade of a weapon is not based solely on hardness, is it not? Instead, it is based on its own spirituality. A weapon with spirituality will definitely be able to increase your yuan qi. But I didn't see this kind of gain on you. The strength of the yuan qi you punched out with your bare hands is no different from the strength of the yuan qi you hacked out with your saber. However, the sharpness of your saber's saber light is not the result of the enhancement of yuan qi, but the special attributes of your saber itself, which is why the saber light you chopped out is very sharp. Xiang Nan thought for a moment and told Meng Dai about the origin of the dragon blood saber. Meng Dai said happily, "Indeed, my guess is correct. Your saber was formed from dragon blood. In other words, it is technically not a weapon at all. It only has the shape and strength of a weapon. If you want to unleash the power of that drop of dragon blood, your dragon blood saber must be reconstructed." Xiang Nan said thoughtfully, "Senior Sister Xue Qi did say that this saber has not been forged at all. If it is modified, its true power will only be unleashed." Dream Butterfly said, "Your current saber is only as hard as a high-grade earth weapon, but the yuan qi you provide is inferior to an ordinary spirit weapon. Quickly, throw your saber into the smelting furnace and forge it again." Xiang Nan walked to the side of the smelting furnace and lifted the lid. He discovered that there was half a furnace of smelting ore inside. The ingredients are already prepared in the smelting furnace. Right now, only your smelting technique will be considered. Meng Dai said, "Look at that book and learn from it." Xiang Nan had never learned how to refine weapons, but the foundation of refining weapons was the same as the foundation of refining pills. That was, he needed to burn them with flames. Xiang Nan quickly flipped through the books and said, "Refining spirit-grade weapons is relatively simple. I have the foundation to refine pills, and I also know the heaven and earth fire control technique. Forging spirit-grade weapons shouldn't be difficult." Xiang Nan had the 9 purities cosmos skill as his basic skill, and the speed at which he learned how to forge weapons was frightening. He only flipped through the books once before firmly remembering the contents in his heart. Afterwards, he poured out all the refining materials in the furnace and divided them into 3 parts. These materials can be refined 3 times by Xiang Nan. Find more materials. Dream Butterfly ran to the side of another smelting furnace and tried to lift the lid, but found that she could not open it no matter what. Xiang Nan said, "Perhaps only one forging furnace can be opened at a time. This is also a consideration for the owner of this layer to the forging talent of those who pass. If the forging fails 3 times, it means that those who pass do not possess powerful forging talent, then they fail." Xiang Nan took out a portion of the refining materials and threw them into the furnace. Then, he caressed his dragon blood saber lovingly. Finally, he was ruthless and threw the saber into the furnace as well. When the top cover of the furnace was closed, 4 pipes suddenly extended from the ground in 4 directions of the furnace. The 4 pipes aimed at the 4 openings of the furnace and began to spray raging flames into the furnace. "Oh. I don't even need to personally release the flames. I just need to control the flames," Xiang Nan said happily. As he spoke, Xiang Nan sat down cross-legged and quietly circulated the high-end fire controlling technique, the universe fire controlling technique, that half of the gourd had been given to him. The flames in the smelting furnace quickly became more flexible. Chapter 446 Reconstruction. The word cosmos generally refers to yin and yang, but in the cosmos fire controlling technique, the word cosmos refers to heaven and earth, meaning to envelop the attributes of the five elements between heaven and earth. Under the heavens, there were countless types of weapons, countless attributes, some hard, some soft, some sturdy, some blazing like flames, some cold like frost, some gentle temperament, some strong character, and so on. The cosmos fire technique divides flames into five attributes: wind, wood, water, fire, and earth. The five attributes of flames gather together. Each attribute of flame can be controlled according to its needs. Xiang Nan drew a circle with both his hands. Under the control of the cosmos fire technique, the flames inside the furnace were divided into five colors: light green for wind, emerald green for wood, scarlet red for fire, azure for water, and dark yellow for earth. Thunder was a derivative of the five elements. Wind, on the other hand, refers to the air in general, as well as the multiple elements in the air. Water is formed by the interaction of the elements in the air. Therefore, the earth is pregnant with wood, wood spit into the wind, weathered into water, water condensed into clouds, clouds formed into lightning, so lightning also has the nickname aquatic fire. It could be said that lightning was an element that included the five elements, but it also jumped out, higher than the existence on it. The cosmos fire technique was based on the lightning meridian's innate skill, and it could be used vividly. At this moment, Xiang Nan finally understood Senior Half-Gourd's painstaking efforts. It turned out that he knew this a long time ago, but he wasn't stingy in imparting the heaven and earth fire controlling technique to this kid who possessed the talent to control the lightning meridians. The fire of the five elements could break down anything within the five elements. The dragon blood saber was coiled together by the five types of flames and quickly melted into a streak of red light. In an instant, the entire furnace burst into red light, illuminating the dark underground world like blood. That's great. This dragon blood is simply the best material for forging weapons. Dream Butterfly clapped her hands and applauded. Xiang Nan used the spirit-grade weapon refining technique to remove the wood impurities from the dragon blood saber, leaving behind only the blood-red boiling liquid. Then, he put the refining materials together in proportion. He saw that a large amount of metal fused with the dragon blood in the smelting furnace, turning into a boiling liquid metal. Under the control of Xiang Nan's fire control technique, it began to spin rapidly. About an hour later, Xiang Nan withdrew his cultivation. The top of the smelting furnace opened with a thud, and a slender saber flew out. The floor beneath the smelting furnace suddenly flipped and the smelting furnace fell to the ground. The corresponding one was a bronze cauldron. The lid of the bronze cauldron was opened and there was a cauldron full of red blood inside. On the outer wall of the bronze cauldron, there was a strange toad relief with 6 eyes. "Quick, temper the saber." Dream Butterfly hurriedly shouted, "The blood in that bronze cauldron is used for cooling. That's the blood of the 6-eyed spirit toad." Xiang Nan's heart skipped a beat. He immediately used his Yuan Qi to control the saber and threw it into the blood of the bronze cauldron. Immediately, the blood started to churn and the saber began to cool down. There were many kinds of things that could temper a saber. Ordinary people used water to temper a saber, but the water was different from place to place. There were artificers who traveled millions of miles to obtain a good spring. And even more powerful artificers used blood to temper their sabers. Those who used human blood also used demonic beast blood. The blood of the 6-eyed spirit toad was recognized as one of the best saber-tempering blood in the world, because its blood had the strongest spirituality, and it was the easiest to fuse with weapons. After Xiang Nan flew out of the slender saber, he grabbed it in his hand and felt that the saber was extremely spiritual, as if it had merged with him. "Good saber." Xiang Nan couldn't help but praise. He could feel that the drop of dragon blood contained in the saber was beginning to emit true power. Unfortunately, this saber is too thin. I'm not used to it. Xiang Nan used both of his fingers to cut through the blade. This blade was only 1 finger wide and about 1.5 meters long. Let's go. Continue to charge. Your dragon blood saber only has the grade of an elementary grade spirit weapon. However, because of the existence of dragon blood, it has already far surpassed an ordinary elementary grade spirit weapon. You can continue to forge in front of you, and it will become what you want. Meng Dai comforted. The two of them began to move forward, while the bronze cauldron slid upwards. It seemed that they were going to follow Xiang Nan all the time, allowing him to temper his saber. After they walked 1,000 meters, they encountered a second staircase. There was also a smelting furnace on this staircase. Looking ahead, there was still a humanoid puppet. The humanoid puppet also held a weapon in its hand, and this weapon was an intermediate grade spirit weapon. Test your forging results. Meng Dai said, if you forge an elementary grade spirit weapon to the satisfaction of your master, you will definitely be able to defeat an intermediate grade spirit weapon. The intermediate grade spirit weapon in the puppet's hand was personally forged by the master of this layer. He could have forged it into a top grade one, but the puppet was only holding a defective one. Obviously, the master of this layer believes that if the artifact forging talent of a passerby is strong enough, then the elementary grade spirit weapon forged by Xiang Nan should be even more top grade than the top grade one. It even surpassed the inferior grade intermediate grade spirit weapons. Xiang Nan walked up with the new dragon blood saber and fought with the puppet. The puppet's own Yuan Qi was the same as Xiang Nan's, but the weapon in its hand strengthened Yuan Qi. Thus, every slash of the sword light caused Xiang Nan to feel endless pressure. As he continued to fight, his hands trembled. Xiang Nan himself wanted to know if he had the talent to forge weapons, so he didn't use martial skills to defeat the puppets. Instead, he fought head-on against the puppets. The two sides fought for a full 5 minutes before Xiang Nan finally shouted. The dragon blood saber violently trembled and let out a dragon roar, splitting the defective intermediate grade leader in the puppet's hand into two. The puppet took a step back, took out a book from its stomach, threw it to Xiang Nan, and then stepped out of the way. Xiang Nan was overjoyed. He picked up the book and read, Spirit Weapon Refining Technique Intermediate Rank. According to the previous practice, Xiang Nan tossed the dragon blood saber into the smelting furnace for reconstruction. When he took it out, it was already an intermediate grade spirit weapon, and it was the best among the best. On the next step, he encountered a puppet. The weapon in his hand was a high-grade spirit weapon, and it was still defective. After Xiang Nan defeated the puppet with the dragon blood saber in his hand, he continued to forge and move forward. Along the way, Xiang Nan used a talent that even he himself was shocked by, cutting through thorns and thorns all the way, constantly shattering the weapons in the puppet's hands. Gradually, the two of them arrived at the stairs of the high-grade earth soldier. At this moment, the dragon blood saber in Xiang Nan's hand already had the grade of a high-grade earth weapon. The strength of the saber radiance he released had nearly doubled. At this moment, the dragon blood saber was 2.5 meters long and as wide as a palm. At the same time, a forked path appeared here. This forked path led directly to the core area of the giant altar. There should have been a black ball of space-time passageway there, but it was empty at this moment. It's already considered qualified here. Meng Dai said, we can enter the fork of the road and leave this altar, but, are you willing? Dream Butterfly gave Xiang Nan a meaningful look. Xiang Nan took a deep breath and said, "Of course not. Since you can continue, you must continue. Let's continue on the right path." Chapter 447 Demonic Heavenly Light of the Heart. I knew you wouldn't give up. Meng Dai smiled and said, "I know you best." Xiang Nan smiled. The two of them continued forward and stepped onto a higher step. Logically speaking, the stairs here should correspond to the elementary heavenly armament region. However, there was a puppet standing at the center of the stairs. The weapon in its hand was still a high-grade earth armament. However, this high-grade earth armament was one of the top grade. What's going on? Dream Butterfly was also a little confused. She wondered, according to the style of the master of this layer, this puppet should be holding a defective elementary heavenly armament. Forget it, let's fight first. Xiang Nan knew that it was useless to think of a solution here. It would be quicker to fight directly. He walked forward and slashed out a saber light at the puppet, and the puppet also returned a saber light. The two saber rays collided in midair and exploded at the same time, completely neutralizing each other's strength. Oh! Xiang Nan raised his eyebrows. He took a step forward and used the Azure Dragon Strike to attack. As for the puppet, it unexpectedly stabbed its sword into the ground and launched a long dragon attack at Xiang Nan. Holy shit! Xiang Nan couldn't help but curse loudly. He used the Azure Dragon to go out to sea with the puppet Azure Dragon and collided with each other. The two of them were forced to stop by the other party. Xiang Nan began to release even more powerful Yuan Qi in an attempt to push the puppet back. The Yuan Qi of the puppet also began to explode, and it remained the same as Xiang Nan. Xiang Nan gritted his teeth and directly refined his qi into electricity, causing dense lightning to burst out. At this moment, a thunderclap suddenly descended from the sky. He fiercely hit the puppet, and the puppet's entire body was wrapped in lightning. Boom! The two Azure Dragons simultaneously pulled out their saber slashes, and two enormous saber lights that were wrapped in lightning shot into the sky, canceling each other out. What a joke! Xiang Nan was shocked. This puppet actually understands my martial skill. Impossible, absolutely impossible. The Azure Dragon was not handed down from ancient times, but created by Xiang Nan himself. Dream Butterfly said in surprise, "Mirror-like puppet. Good brother, the master of this layer has left behind a mirror-like ability for the puppet. It can imitate all of your martial skills. Look at the sky." Xiang Nan looked up and saw a huge mirror sticking to the dome of the underground world. Upon seeing the mirror, Xiang Nan shouted, "Heavenly illumination of the demonic heart." The demonic heavenly heart reflection was a weapon that only existed in legends. Moreover, it had to be an epic-level artificer to create it. This kind of mirror's ability was to imitate the strength of a martial artist and fight against the martial artist himself. Normally, such mirrors were placed among the world's top elders. It was used by those elders who encountered bottlenecks to fight against themselves in order to break through their limits. I didn't expect that this heavenly mirror of the heart demon wasn't a legend, but a real existence. Dream Butterfly was also shocked and said, "The owner of this floor is definitely a peerless artificer. Unfortunately, the demonic heart heavenly mirror cannot be moved. It must be personally forged by an artificer. From now on, it will remain motionless." Xiang Nan sighed. Otherwise, he would have pulled out the mirror. Once taken away, the mirror will be destroyed immediately. Xiang Nan gritted his teeth and released a mo finger at the puppet. As expected, the puppet also released a mo finger at Xiang Nan. The two clashed, canceling each other out. It's impossible to win. Its yuan qi is the same as mine, and its martial skills are the same as mine. Even its reaction and combat awareness are the same as mine. The bigger Xiang Nan was, the more anxious he became. In the end, Xiang Nani was ruthless and used his strongest move, the dragon subduing slash. A 20-meter blade light shot into the sky. However, that puppet actually released a dragon subduing slash. The two were still canceling each other out. Xiang Nan coughed out a mouthful of blood and received a tremendous backlash. He then fiercely fell back. However, the puppet did not receive any backlash and just stood there quietly. Your realm is too low. If you use a blade with the power of the 8th level of origin return, you will receive a backlash. However, the puppet does not have a realm, so it will not receive a backlash. Meng Dai shook her head and sighed, looks like we won't be able to cross this staircase. Xiang Nan circulated the 9 purities cosmos skill. After adjusting his breathing for a while, he stood up and said, "No, there's still one more move that's useless. Let me see if it will work." As he spoke, Xiang Nan took a step forward and released a formless tribulation finger at the puppet. Previously, he had never used this move, because this move was too opportunistic, but now, it was impossible to use it. The puppet actually pointed at Xiang Nan with its fingers together, and even a Buddha standing phantom appeared on the puppet's body. Are you kidding me? Xiang Nan was dumbfounded. However, when Xiang Nan pointed out, it was a black finger force, and when the puppet pointed out, it exploded into pieces. Ah! Xiang Nan turned around and exchanged glances with Dream Butterfly. They were both very surprised. Meng Dai clapped her hands and smiled. The tribulation-free finger tests a martial artist's innate talent and comprehension of life and death. However, there are no puppets that can imitate these two things. Even the demonic heart heavenly mirror cannot imitate them. Ha! No matter how powerful the heart demon heavenly mirror was, it could not imitate Xiang Nan's divine talent, let alone the comprehension of life and death. How could a puppet obtain such comprehension? I really didn't expect that. Xiang Nan didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He cupped his fists and bowed to the sky. This junior is reckless. I have no choice but to make this decision. I hope that senior spirit in heaven can forgive me. As he spoke, the puppet was reshaped, and he took out a book and a strange stone from his bosom and threw it at Xiang Nan. Xiang Nan took a look at the book and found that it read, Heavenly Weapon Forging Technique Beginner Stage. That's great. Xiang Nan was overjoyed. With this book, I will be able to forge heavenly grade weapons myself. At the same time, Xiang Nan and Dream Butterfly stared at the stone and widened their eyes, saying in unison, Soul Stone. My God, it's really a soul stone. Xiang Nan held the gray stone in his hand, and the excitement in his heart was not to mention how intense it was. Soul stones were gemstones used to refine artifact spirits, and the so-called artifact spirits were the souls of weapons. The appearance of a weapon spirit had nothing to do with the grade of the weapon. Some weapons had already reached the Tao weapon level and did not possess a weapon spirit. However, some weapons only had spirit-grade weapons, but a weapon spirit had already appeared. This artifact spirit was a very elusive existence. Some people said that it was because of the tacit understanding between a martial artist and a weapon, to the extent that their hearts were connected, that the artifact spirit could be nurtured. However, no matter how the artifact spirit appeared, to nurture it, one had to rely on soul stones. At this moment, a stone stele slowly rose up beside Xiang Nan. There were words on the stone stele. Read carefully, carelessly and clearly. Finding ore was also a compulsory course for artificers. Therefore, when they arrived here, they no longer provided ore materials to the entrance examiners. They needed to explore the world and search for ore by themselves. Chapter 448 Dragon Soul. Since the ore would no longer be provided in the future, the next thing to consider was not the weapon level of the passerby, but the martial artist's comprehension of the weapon in his hand. It was written on the stone steel that when the entrance challenger saw the stone steel, it meant that the entrance challenger had already been defeated. The puppet controlled by the heart demon Heavenly Mirror also meant that the entrance challenger and his weapon had reached a deeper level of tacit understanding. The more tacit a martial artist and a weapon were, the easier it was to produce a weapon spirit. Thus, the master of this layer gave 7 soul stones and refined them together to form a weapon spirit. After reading this, Xiang Nan felt guilty. He was not the puppet that he had defeated because of his tacit understanding with the weapon. Instead, he had speculatively used the unparalleled tribulation finger. It says there are a total of 7 soul stones, which means there are 6 more puppets behind us. Let's continue. Meng Dai said excitedly. But I haven't been able to form a strong tacit understanding with weapons. Xiang Nan sighed. If he had the black Lin saber in his hand, he would definitely be able to break through. However, he had the dragon blood saber he had just obtained. Meng Dai said, comprehending weapons requires years of accumulated experience. A martial artist has to fight alongside his weapon. The master of this floor wants you to stay here and fight against the puppets, so as to improve your tacit understanding with the weapons. However, we don't have that much time to waste here. If you want to cultivate tacit understanding, you can also cultivate it in the outside world to fight against enemies. You're right. We can only do this first. Xiang Nan grasped his saber and walked down the stairs. The second puppet was still holding a high-grade earth weapon, but its yuan qi was already stronger than Xiang Nan's. This meant that Xiang Nan had to use a higher degree of tacit understanding in order to defeat it. Xiang Nan did not hesitate at all. The puppet also released its tribulation-free finger, but in the end, it shook itself to death. As a result, Xiang Nan obtained the second soul stone, along with the heavenly grade weapon forging technique intermediate grade. By the third puppet, the strength of the puppet's yuan qi was already astonishing, surpassing Xiang Nan's by nearly 30%. When Xiang Nan released the phaseless tribulation finger, the puppet no longer used the phaseless tribulation finger foolishly. It actually dodged. Unfortunately, the speed of the phaseless tribulation finger was too fast, hitting the puppet in an instant, causing its realm to drop drastically. Thus, Xiang Nan discovered an even weirder scene. The strength of the puppet's yuan qi wasn't reduced by the scope of the first level, but by the fourth level. The puppet was instantly so weak that Xiang Nan was stunned for a moment. He rushed forward and slashed the puppet to death. What's going on? Xiang Nandaki. Meng Dai thought for a moment and said, do you remember what I told you earlier? The puppets and monsters here are all self-adjusting after detecting the realm of a passer. Your phaseless tribulation fingers should have lowered their cultivation by 1 level, but because their own yuan qi is more than 4 times stronger than yours, it's the strength of a heavenly tribulation realm expert's yuan qi. So if you point, they will fall to the 4th level. The puppet itself did not have a realm, but the yuan qi in its body was injected by a heavenly tribulation realm expert. My God! Xiang Nan's eyes widened. The tribulation-free finger has such a miraculous effect here. Isn't it like adding wings to a tiger? If Xiang Nan continued to charge forward, each puppet's yuan qi would be stronger than the previous one. However, Xiang Nan didn't care about 3721. He used his phaseless tribulation finger to directly knock the puppet down to the 4th level, and then slashed it with his saber. By the time the 7 puppets were all killed, the weapon refining technique Xiang Nan had obtained was already the profound grade weapon refining technique beginner grade. Weapons are classified as mortal, spirit, earth, heaven, Tao, profound, and God. Throughout the contemporary era, even the most supreme royal weaponry refiners in the entire the Houtian Empire could only forge profound grade elementary grade weapons. No matter how high the refining methods were, they would not be able to grasp them. And the weapon refining art that Xiang Nan had obtained at this moment had actually allowed him to become one of the top weapon refiners in an instant. Of course, Xiang Nan was much weaker than a top royal artificer in terms of skill and experience, but at the very least, his knowledge of artificing was on par with that of a top royal artificer. Ha, my good brother, even if you no longer possess martial arts strength, you are still a good seedling of a top artificer. No matter where you go, it will be very popular. When Meng Dai saw how outstanding her man was, she also became happy. I'm still a long way from being a top artificer. Without decades of experience in artificing, I wouldn't dare to call myself that. Xiang Nan shook his head with a smile and arranged 7 soul stones in front of him. Xiang Nan said, I have gathered all 7 soul stones, but my tacit understanding with the weapon is not enough. It seems that I can't use them now. Something's wrong. Dream Butterfly blinked her eyes. Your weapon itself has a spirit. Have you forgotten? There's a drop of dragon blood in it. A dragon is the highest spirit in the world. A drop of its blood is no joke. That's right. How could I forget about this? Xiang Nan slapped his forehead and hurriedly walked to the smelting furnace beside him. This smelting furnace was used to temper the spirit of the artifact by those who had broken through. The shape of this furnace was completely different from other smelting furnaces. It was extremely peculiar. Xiang Nan threw the dragon blood saber and 7 soul stones in and began to temper it with the Cosmos Imperial Fire technique. Soul stones could not increase the grade of a weapon, but they could temper the spirit of a weapon. Weapons with a weapon spirit and weapons without a weapon spirit were not of the same level. Under the burning of the 5 elements flame, the 7 soul stones turned into liquid and merged into the dragon blood saber. Xiang Nan carefully controlled the flames, and 7 hours of refining passed. Just as Xiang Nan thought that he had failed and was about to let go, a dragon roar that shook the heavens and earth suddenly came from the furnace. Ah! Xiang Nan's pupils constricted, and he actually saw the shadow of an azure dragon soaring into the sky from the smelting furnace. The enormous azure dragon was over 5,000 meters long. The entire azure dragon circled under the dome and slowly trembled. A pair of dragon eyes looked down. Both Xiang Nan and Meng Dai were so scared that their faces turned pale. They actually discovered that they had already knelt on the ground at some unknown time. Even they did not realize this action. That was just the phantom image of an azure dragon. The azure dragon phantom only came from a drop of dragon blood. However, Xiang Nan discovered that the azure dragon phantom seemed to be enduring some great pain. It's going through a lightning tribulation. The dream butterfly screamed. That drop of dragon blood was left behind by the azure dragon during the tribulation, so it still retains the painful memories of the tribulation. Good brother, hurry up. Crossing the tribulation with it. You must share the tribulation with it before you can obtain its recognition. Only then will it be willing to become your artifact spirit. However, Xiang Nan was shocked. How can I cross the tribulation with it? I don't know what to do. At this moment, Xiang Nan suddenly felt a powerful attraction coming from the soul stone. Immediately after, Xiang Nan felt his soul being drawn out and engulfed by the azure dragon phantom. Chapter 449 New Rushing Lightning Saber Absolute. Before Xiang Nan could realize what had happened, he felt that the world had changed. He was already inside the azure dragon's body. It could even be said that he had already transformed into an azure dragon, and he was constantly rushing towards the sky. The entire underground world was gone. The surroundings were a wilderness. Above his head was the endless sky, and the dark clouds that filled the heavens and earth. Suddenly, a bolt of Jinlei descended from the sky and landed heavily on Xiang Nan. The azure dragon ate the pain and let out an angry dragon roar. It did not fear life and death, instead, it crazily rushed towards the top of the sky. Xiang Nan was also infected by the azure dragon's unyielding will. At this moment, he was the azure dragon, and the azure dragon was Xiang Nan. Come on! Damn it! Come on again! Xiang Nan had already forgotten who he was. He roared angrily at the heavens, like an unyielding warrior, rushing towards the heavens with the azure dragon. Boom! Another lightning tribulation descended and struck the azure dragon's body. Xiang Nan felt incomparably painful all over his body, and even his soul trembled from being struck. Xiang Nan had already sensed that the azure dragon had a trace of timidity, but Xiang Nan himself had an extremely strong fighting spirit. He was the type of person who was strong when he was strong, and he never lowered his head. Go! Xiang Nan roared as he brought the azure dragon into the sky again. Boom! 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 Tribulation lightning struck down one after another, becoming more and more powerful, continuously hacking down the struggling, resisting, and struggling azure dragons in the sky to the ground. Later, the lightning tribulation was already incomparably terrifying. After hacking the azure dragon to the ground, before it could fly again, another tribulation lightning descended, crushing the azure dragon to the ground and fiercely bombarding the azure dragon indiscriminately. Xiang Nan's fighting spirit had risen to its limit. He shouted at the heavens want to destroy me, and I will break the heavens. The azure dragon's fighting spirit was suddenly high, and it unexpectedly unleashed its boundless potential, soaring into the 9 heavens with a whoosh. The azure dragon actually charged into the dark clouds, rolling and twisting in the clouds, fighting against the tribulation lightning. The clouds were filled with thunder, and golden lightning interweaved into a net, trapping the azure dragon within. The azure dragon collided left and right, releasing waves of furious dragon roars. Xiang Nan roared angrily, even if I were to cut into thousands of pieces and shatter my bones, I will not accept it. I will not lower my head. The azure dragon let out an unprecedented roar. The roar of the dragon resounded throughout the heavens and earth, causing the clouds to scatter in all directions, and even the earth to tremble. However, in the end, it was still unable to survive the lightning tribulation. In the endless golden lightning, it was shattered to pieces. At that moment, Xiang Nan failed, and the azure dragon also failed. I wanted to break through the heavens, but there was nothing I could do. Xiang Nan let out a long sigh, and the azure dragon's body was shattered and its soul dissipated. At the last moment, when the dragon's soul floated out and was struck by the golden lightning, it looked at Xiang Nan. As for the dragon head that was beheaded, the moment it was shattered by the golden lightning, it left behind a drop of blood and tears. It was as if the azure dragon was conveying an intention to Xiang Nan. Thank you, old friend, but you have fulfilled an unfulfilled wish of mine. Even if I die, I do not regret it. Xiang Nan was also affected by the tenacity of the azure dragon and its unyielding dragon nature, tears flowing down his eyes. And that drop of dragon blood tear was Xiang Nan. He scattered into the sky, and along with it, countless dragon blood splashed onto the ground. Only Xiang Nan's tear of dragon blood landed on a tree. Xiang Nan also died with the azure dragon, but Xiang Nan's martial spirit and his saber intent didn't die. The drop of dragon blood left a blade-shaped mark on the tree. After many years, the entire tree had already withered and shattered, and only the blade shape remained forever. Xiang Nan suddenly opened his eyes and gasped heavily. He discovered that he was still in the underground world. However, his mood was unable to calm down for a long time. Everything that happened just now was too real, making it impossible for Xiang Nan to tell whether it was real or not. It turned out that the blade was actually formed by his martial soul, but didn't the azure dragon crossing tribulation happen hundreds of thousands of years ago, or even millions of years ago? But at that time, there wasn't a single Xiang Nan in the world, let alone any saber intent. Could it be that reincarnation has been decided by the heavens? Xiang Nan lowered his head. He didn't know why, but his eyes were also dripping. He murmured, "Old man, it's my honor to send you off for the last time." "Good brother, are you crying?" Dream Butterfly sat down on her knees and wiped away Xiang Nan's tears. "Did the condensing equipment spirit fail? I saw you sitting here for a long time and didn't dare to disturb you." Xiang Nan took a deep breath and wiped away the tear stains on his face, revealing a brilliant smile. "It's nothing. It's just that for a while, I felt something in my heart." On the dome of the underground world, the azure dragon phantom took a deep look at Xiang Nan and charged into the smelting furnace with a shout. The smelting furnace instantly shone brightly. With a thud from the top cover, a 3-meter-tall saber soared into the sky. There was actually a dragon ridge lying on the back of the giant saber. The blade was green and red, the blade was red, and the blade was green. On the surface of the blade, there were faintly visible dragon scale. Xiang Nan immediately tempered the saber and finally obtained a 3-meter-long, odd-shaped saber with a dragon ridge covering its back. It was as if a small azure dragon was lying straight on the back of the knife. When Xiang Nan grasped the hilt with the dragon scale pattern actually began to extend. After coiling around Xiang Nan's right arm twice, the end of the hilt turned into a dragon claw and firmly grabbed Xiang Nan's arm. "Wow!" Meng Dai was dumbfounded as she said, This saber, is it alive?" Xiang Nan took 3 deep breaths in a row and said, "Tribulation with the dragon has taught me something. Although the Buddhist profound arts are strong, they do not match my innate attributes. Just now, I suddenly came to an epiphany of a martial skill that can be used in my lightning rushing saber technique." As he spoke, Xiang Nan turned his chi into lightning. His entire right arm was wrapped in lightning and he shouted, "Thunder, the raptor swings its tail." At this moment, an azure dragon phantom appeared in the air behind Xiang Nan. The shadow shook its tail and let out roars of dragons. Xiang Nan slashed out horizontally, lightning condensed into a ray of light, and the saber light sliced out a large crescent moon that was almost round. The large crescent blade radiance swept out like dozens of tiny thunder dragons roaring on the blade radiance. The saber light shot into the distant sky of the underground world, but it was still in the endless darkness, emitting dazzling electric light. "Lei, the azure dragon, is out at sea." Xiang Nan changed his moves and stabbed the giant saber into the ground. He charged forward and bombarded. At the same time, a huge dragon head phantom appeared in the air behind him. The dragon head opened its mouth and let out a shocking dragon roar, exactly the same as when it fought against tribulation lightning in the dark clouds. Xiang Nan's entire body turned into blazing flames as he charged forward. His right arm, which was holding a huge saber, had actually turned into a thunder dragon. The lightning dragon bit the back of the saber with its mouth and charged with Xiang Nan. Its might shook the heavens. Thunder, dragon shocking sunshine. Xiang Nan changed his stance and a complete azure dragon phantom appeared in the air behind him. The azure dragon phantom was 50 meters long. Xiang Nan slashed his saber into the sky, and a small thunder dragon flew up with a crescent blade light in its mouth. Xiang Nan slashed again, and the second tiny lightning dragon flew up with the saber light in its mouth. Xiang Nan chopped out 13 times in a row. 13 rays of saber light condensed into a 50-meter-long thunder dragon. The thunder dragon raised its head to the sky and roared in the 9 heavens. Slash! Xiang Nan soared into the air, inserting a huge saber into the lightning dragon's saber light and fiercely hacking down on the ground. The lightning dragon instantly transformed into a 50-meter-long saber light, illuminating the altar, dispelling the darkness, and descending violently. With a single slash, the stairs beneath the altar were directly sliced out of an unfathomable rift valley. The entire altar was trembling. However, the altar instantly regained its original appearance. Dream Butterfly stood at the side and watched the scene. She was shocked. Is this the strength a 5th-level origin returning martial artist should have? Chapter 450 Traces of Battle. Hey, look! What is that? There was a small palace at the center of the altar. Meng Dai pointed at the top of the main entrance of the palace and shouted. Xiang Nan was playing with his new saber. Hearing Dream Butterfly's shout, he turned around and saw a small page flapping its wings and floating there. Fortunately, I came underground. Otherwise, I would have missed it. Xiang Nan nodded and pointed at the page. Little Sparrow, come back. Little Sparrow cried out happily and rushed out with a whoosh. The page immediately flapped its wings and fled. Although its flying speed was not as fast as the little bird's, its flexibility in turning was better than the little bird's. The little bird flew left and right, continuously chasing after the pages of the book. It seemed to be very happy. So those with wings can fly. Meng Dai smiled and said something meaningful. The target of this no-fly zone was those people and creatures that could not fly, but could suddenly fly afterwards. For example, humans could not fly, but because they had Yuan Qi, they could fly. But even though the little bird was a demonic beast, it was still a bird. Even if it did not have the identity of a demonic beast, it could still fly. Therefore, such a flying species was not affected by the no-fly zone. Xiang Nan allowed the little bird to chase after the pages, while he continued to explore his dragon blood saber. He gently touched the blade with his left hand, and could feel that a spiritual sense was being nurtured inside the blade. This spiritual sense was the embryonic form of the artifact spirit, but because it had just appeared, it was still unable to float out in its complete form and was still in the saber. Meng Dai said, "Good brother, as long as you use this saber properly and do not disappoint its spirit and will, its artifact spirit will surely grow stronger in time. Perhaps one day, its artifact spirit will be able to fly out of the saber and help you fight together." Xiang Nan nodded. He was very clear about the artifact spirit. Taking advantage of the fact that it was safer now, Xiang Nan attracted the heavenly lightning. While recovering his Yuan Qi, he slowly recovered his cultivation base. He discovered that as long as the phaseless tribulation finger was released, his realm would drop regardless of whether he hit the enemy or not. After his cultivation level dropped, he would slowly recover, recovering once every 5 minutes. If he used the phaseless tribulation finger 3 times, it would take him 15 minutes to fully recover. After grasping the laws of the tribulation-free finger, Xiang Nan knew how to make better use of it in the future. Cha-cha! Cha-cha! The bird's impatient cries resounded in the air. It chased after the page for half an hour, but it was still unable to catch it. Help this little fellow. Otherwise, he will be angry to death in a while. Meng Dai felt that the little bird was very interesting and couldn't help but laugh. Xiang Nan smiled faintly. He condensed his yuan qi under his feet, and then a burst of lightning exploded beneath his feet, bouncing Xiang Nan back. That speed was so fast that Xiang Nan shot into the air like an afterimage. With his previous experience in capturing the pages, Xiang Nan was even more familiar with the road this time. When he flew out, he swayed a move and tricked the pages once before grabbing the escaping pages in his hand. He flipped through the pages and compared the 2 pages he had obtained earlier. This should be the 7th one he had captured. Let's go, it's time to go up. Xiang Nan put away the pages and said, there are no heavenly grade artifact forging materials here. We can look for them at the altar above. Xiang Nan threw the dragon blood saber into the sky. After the dragon blood saber touched the dome, it began to spin rapidly. Xiang Nan hugged the dream butterfly and jumped up. He grabbed the hole drilled by the dragon blood saber with one hand and kept climbing up. This was the central area of the underground altar, and the corresponding world on the ground was also the central area of the chain. As soon as the 2 of them came out, they saw the black ball passageway leading to the next floor. Xiang Nan originally thought that Sima Nantian and the others would definitely guard him here, and he was already prepared to fight at any time. However, when he came up, he saw that the result was not the same. It seems that there has been a battle here. Dream Butterfly cautiously looked around and said, look, there are many traces of a fight. Xiang Nan was also observing. There were traces of weapons hacking everywhere on the ground. All the trees within a mile of him were gone. Looking further away, a large portion of the trees a mile away were cut off by their waste, and their slices were as smooth as mirrors. Xiang Nan frowned and said, let's go. Let's go to the 3rd ring first. The 2 of them walked out and passed by the 2nd ring, heading towards the 3rd ring. At this moment, Xiang Nan was suddenly stunned. He pointed at a tree not far away and said, look. Does that person look familiar? Dream Butterfly looked in the direction and saw a person hanging from a tree branch. One rope was tied to a tree branch at one end, while the other was tied to the neck of a dead martial artist, creating a scene similar to hanging himself. However, it was clear that the man did not commit suicide, but was hung by someone else. It's him. Meng Dieki said, I know this person. He is a kid from Sima Nanshan's team. How did he die here? Looks like someone did this on purpose. Is he demonstrating against Sima Nantian? Very likely. Xiang Nan's tone became solemn as he said, the battle scene he saw near the passageway earlier should have been left behind by Sima Nantian and the others. Xiang Nan's heart was heavy. Who had the ability to kill one of Sima Nanshan's junior brothers? Could it be Dong Wushang? Something's wrong. According to the time, Dong Wushang is still in the blissful hell, using his cultivation technique to consume the spiritual herbs in his body. Could there be someone stronger than Sima Nantian? Meng Dai also found it inconceivable. She and Xiang Nan knew very well how strong Sima Nantian was. No matter what, we should be careful. Xiang Nan and the other 2 continued to advance, arriving at the 3rd ring district. The two of them found a three-ring altar. Xiang Nan said, "There are dangers everywhere. It's too dangerous to leave you alone outside. Why don't I send you to the underground world and pick you up when I'm done?" Meng Dai shook her head, "I'm not leaving. I want to accompany you, and what if someone breaks into the underground world?" "That's right. Follow me to the altar. My strength has increased greatly, so I should be able to protect you." As he spoke, Xiang Nan pulled Dream Butterfly to the altar in the third ring. The key hidden in his sleeve triggered the mechanism of the altar. On the first step, a mechanical beast walked out. "A humanoid puppet?" Xiang Nan asked curiously. He didn't expect that the altar in the third ring would no longer be a mechanical bear, but a humanoid puppet. The appearance of this humanoid puppet was almost the same as that of the humanoid puppets in the underground world. However, the puppets here had a clear realm. They were at the 9th level of origin return, and were not as powerful as the puppets in the underground world. This puppet doesn't release Yuan Qi, much less understand martial techniques. It shouldn't be difficult. As soon as the humanoid puppet came out, it quickly ran towards Xiang Nan. It raised its fist high and punched towards Xiang Nan. Chapter 451 Evil Ghost Chase. Although this puppet's realm was frighteningly high, it did not possess the power to suppress Xiang Nan. In other words, it would receive full damage from Xiang Nan. Xiang Nan clenched his saber tightly and sliced out a saber light towards the puppet. Through the Dragon Blood Saber's true high-grade earth weapon, this saber light instantly doubled Xiang Nan's Yuan Qi strength to about twice that of an unused weapon. This increase in Yuan Qi was extremely terrifying. This was because Xiang Nan knew that ordinary high-grade earth soldiers could increase the strength of their Yuan Qi by 1.5 times. And because his Dragon Blood Saber was too special, its amplification was even more powerful than other high-grade earth soldiers. With this saber strike, the puppet faced each other with a heavy punch. When the fist met the saber light, the fist and the others were immediately cut into two halves. On the ground, a round metal or the size of a grape rolled out from the puppet fragment. Fire-burning yellow crystal stone. Xiang Nan picked up the metal ore and said, "This yellow jingsher can be used to refine intermediate-grade earth weapons. It's worth quite a lot and can be accepted." He put away the fire-burning yellow crystal stone and continued to advance 100 meters. Dream Butterfly followed behind Xiang Nan, not going to clash head-on with the puppet. 200 meters were 2 humanoid puppets, 300 meters were 4, 508 meters, 600 meters and 16, then 32, 64, 128, 256. When Xiang Nan arrived at 800 meters, he encountered 128 humanoid puppets at the 9th level of the origin realm. "Brat, return my life." At this moment, a shrill scream suddenly came from the forest behind Xiang Nan. "Shit, Tan Bu Hui." Dream Butterfly was shocked and looked behind with Xiang Nan. The sound of the wind in the jungle was cold, and a black shadow whistled from midair. "Brat, I've caught up to you." That person was indeed Tan Tang's master and foster father, Tan Bu Hui. The skinny old man stood at the edge of the altar and shouted with a ferocious expression, "Get off me. I will make you pay with blood." Meng Dai rolled her eyes and said, "Then you should catch up. Old man, your foster daughter deserves to die. Even if she can still be resurrected, we will still kill her again." "What? Aren't you going to avenge your foster daughter? Stinky girl, you still dare to be so stubborn when you're about to die." Tan Bu Hui took a step up the stairs and started running at top speed. Ah! This time, Dream Butterfly did not expect Tan Bu Hui and Xiang Nan weren't the same group that walked onto the altar, so they couldn't share Xiang Nan's 3-ring keys. According to the rules of the altar, Tan Bu Hui definitely wouldn't be able to walk up. As long as he walked up, the stairs here would be infinitely longer. But in the end, Tan Bu Hui actually came up, which meant that he had at least one 3-ring key in his hand. It can't be. Meng Dai was shocked. This old ghost can also break through to the 3rd ring. Xiang Nan also felt that it was unexpected. Although Tan Bu Hui's realm was at the 4th level of the heavenly Yuan realm, he could only be considered a martial artist with average strength in the same realm. He was not an outstanding martial artist. This kind of person was facing the puppet on the altar. How could he be the opponent of the puppet and obtain the key to the 3rd ring? What right does he have? Dream Butterfly was puzzled. Sure enough, since Tan Bu Hui had also come up, a new puppet appeared at the 100th meter. This puppet was only aimed at Tan Bu Hui, and it actually possessed the 8th level of the heavenly Yuan realm. He's not a martial arts genius. He definitely can't defeat a Tianyuan 8th layer puppet. Meng Dai still refused to believe what she saw. The puppet at the 8th level of the heaven realm let out a cry. Within the range of Xiang Nan's vision, it turned into a copage afterimage and directly arrived in front of Tan Bu Hui. As for Tan Bu Hui, he stretched out both of his hands, each holding 4 silver needles. He inserted 8 silver needles into the ground in a strange order at the same time. At this moment, the 8 silver needles turned into a very simple formation. The humanoid puppet was originally extremely fast, but once it was affected by the formation, it would be difficult to move forward. Tan Bu Hui walked forward and punched the puppet's head. He pointed at Xiang Nan and said, "Little bastard, wait for me. I will come up and take your life." "Oh no, this is really bad." Meng Dai cried out. This old fellow didn't use strength to defeat the puppet at all. Instead, he used the mysterious Dao technique. The puppets here were also created on the basis of the profound Dao. It just so happened to be restrained by old monster Tan. But now, Xiang Nan could no longer control that much, because there were already 128 humanoid puppets walking towards him. "Quick, kill these puppets," Meng Dai hurriedly said. The 128 puppets rushed towards Xiang Nan at the same time. Xiang Nan crouched in horse steps, his left hand holding the back of the saber, his right hand holding the hilt of the saber, and made a move to pull out the saber. At this moment, an azure dragon phantom appeared in the air behind Xiang Nan. Xiang Nan shouted in a deep voice, "Thunder, hazy tail." The azure dragon phantom let out a dragon roar and swept its tail out. Correspondingly, Xiang Nan's dragon blood saber fiercely slashed out a full circle of lightning saber light. The lightning saber light struck all the puppets at the same time, cutting them in half like chopping melons and vegetables. Ha! Tan Bu Hui, who had already reached the 200th meter, was shocked when he saw this scene. He shouted, "Little bastard, what kind of martial skill is that? I haven't seen you use it before." Ha! Dream Butterfly clapped her hands and said, "Old bastard. This is a new martial skill that my brother Xiang Nan has learned. He has obtained the true inheritance of this layer master. He has already learned a method that can ignore realm suppression. Do you dare to step forward? If you dare, my good brother will be able to kill you." Tan Bu Hui sneered, "Yellow-haired little girl, you also seem to be lying to me." Tan Bu Hui inserted 8 silver needles into the ground again, binding the 2 puppets and blasting them before chasing them to the 300th meter. Xiang Nan said in a deep voice, "Although this old monster's martial arts strength is average, his profound martial arts skills are indeed not trivial. If this continues, he will probably be able to catch up with us. Meng Dai rolled her eyes and whispered in Xiang Nan's ears. After hearing this, Xiang Nan couldn't help but laugh and say, "You really are." Dream Butterfly proudly raised her head and said, "That's natural. I don't want to see who I am." Tan Bu Hui also saw this scene. He was suspicious and said, "What are you two talking about?" Meng Dai made a grimace at Tan Bu Hui. "You're saying that you're so old that you're about to die. You won't be able to live for a few days." Tan Bu Hui sneered and said, "Now you should be arrogant. There won't be a chance in a while." Xiang Nan walked to the 900th meter and encountered 256 humanoid puppets at the 9th level of the Origin Realm. As for Tan Bu Hui, his speed was also very fast. He had crossed 600 meters in a row, arriving at the 700th meter, the 128th puppet area. Tan Bu Hui's hands kept sprinkling as silver needles fell like rain. The silver needles placed an even more complex and enormous formation on the ground and shouted, "9 souls, life-chasing formation." 9 evil spirits flew out of the formation. Those evil spirits were actually the human souls that Tan Bu Hui had refined to death in the entrance hall of the Devil's Sea. At that time, Xiang Nan had personally broken open the formation on the gate, making it impossible for Tan Bu Hui to use the evil spirits he had accumulated. He put it away and changed it into another formation to deal with the puppets. Chapter 452 Altar Pursuing War. Tan Bu Hui's expression was filled with resentment as wisps of black gas appeared on his face. From the looks of it, he was like a ghost. However, those 9 ghosts weren't used to kill humanoid puppets, and the ghosts didn't possess such abilities. However, the 9 ghosts formed a circle and flew in midair. Each of them put on painful and twisted faces and let out earth-shattering cries of grief. The howl was as painful as the screams of countless souls being burned by the flames in the sea of purgatory flames. This cry immediately caused the 128 puppets to shake. The movements of those puppets became extremely strange. Each of them either lay on the ground or rolled on the spot. It seemed that they had lost control. Tan Bu Hui stepped forward and stabbed through the heads of the puppets one by one. "I don't know how many vicious profound Tao techniques this old fellow has practiced. Let's hurry up and catch up with him," Meng Dai said. Xiang Nan walked to a position of 900 meters, and 256 puppets pounced towards him. Xiang Nan held the saber in his right hand and squatted in horse steps. He drew out his saber and shouted, "Thunder!" The raptor wagged its tail. Those puppets actually changed their moves. The 256 puppets were actually hugged together, and the treasure became a giant mechanism ball. Xiang Nan's lightning saber slashed down, only killing 7 or 8 puppets on the periphery. However, to the 200-odd puppets, these puppets were drizzling and not worth mentioning. The puppet of the 3rd ring has actually learned to defend itself. Xiang Nan Daki said, "Although my Thunder Dragon Saber technique is powerful, it consumes a lot of Yuan Qi. I can't use it like this all the time." The new Lightning Rushing Saber Ju was named the Thunder Dragon Saber technique by Xiang Nan in order to distinguish it from the Lightning Rushing Saber Ju. If the fierce dragon only killed 7 or 8 puppets every time it waved its tail, then before the puppets were all dead, Xiang Nan's Yuan Qi would be empty. I can only use an even stronger move. Xiang Nan stabbed his saber into the ground and shouted, "Thunder, the Azure Dragon is out of the sea." A giant dragon head phantom slowly took shape behind Xiang Nan. Xiang Nan's entire body was burning with flames and lightning as he charged towards the mechanism ball. The Azure Dragon's powerful lightning saber light rushed out of the sea and scattered the enormous mechanism ball. Large patches of humanoid golems were scattered and thrown into the air. Xiang Nan's final move, drawing the saber slash, slanted into the sky. The enormous lightning saber light instantly killed more than 50 puppets. Adding on the fact that the puppet was already scattered, Xiang Nan jumped into the air, followed by a wave of thunder, raptor waving tail. The great full moon saber light slashed out horizontally, and the remaining humanoid puppets were all slashed at the waist. After Xiang Nan landed, Tan Buhui also walked to the 900th meter. At this moment, he and Xiang Nan were already standing on the same platform. Tan Buhui's eyes were filled with resentment as he angrily said, "Little bastard, I have never had a descendant in my life. I managed to find a foster daughter that matched my temper and temperament, but you killed her instead. Today, I will use your blood to pay tribute to my Tanger's undead." However, at this moment, the remnants of the puppet on the ground merged again at an astonishing speed, turning into 256 Tianyuan 8th layer puppets that stood in front of Tan Buhui. Xiang Nan brought the dream butterfly back, retreating all the way outside the core palace. At the 900th meter junction, he stopped. As Tan Buhui set up the 9 souls life chasing array on the ground, he sneered, "Continue retreating. If you retreat any further, you will encounter a mechanical king of the first level of the heavenly Yuan realm. I'll see how you, a 5th level of the origin realm, die. Do you choose to die at the hands of the mechanical king or at my hands?" The 9 souls fate chasing formation had already been activated, and the many puppets that had been disrupted were unable to move normally. Tan Buhui kept jumping between the puppets, using silver needles to assassinate the puppets. Xiang Nan waved his hand and grabbed the fire-burning yellow crystal stones scattered on the ground. He put them into his storage ring and stared at Tan Buhui. Xiang Nan said, "You perverts have committed many evil deeds. Even if I don't kill you, I will come to take you in one day." "What evil deeds?" Tan Buhui shouted, "Where is justice for you so-called decent people? Don't tell me you've never killed anyone in your life. What's the difference between you and us?" Xiang Nan frowned and said sternly, "Speak these words to the vengeful souls who have died at your hands." "No need, I can ask you directly, because you are the next vengeful soul in my hand." When Tan Buhui killed the last puppet, he suddenly pounced toward Xiang Nan and the other 2. "Retreat!" Xiang Nan hugged Dream Butterfly's waist, his right foot touched the ground, and his body quickly floated backwards. Xiang Nan retreated for several tens of meters. In the central palace, a humanoid puppet with a huge saber rumbled out. This puppet was 10 meters tall. The giant saber in his hand was also as long as 8 meters. Whether it was its body or realm, it was far stronger than the other humanoid puppets. Furthermore, it possessed the realm of the 9th level of the heavenly Yuan realm. Because at this moment, Tan Buhui also caught up. According to the laws of the altar, the puppets here were judged according to the highest realm amongst those who had broken through. Tan Buhui was at the 4th level of the heavenly Yuan realm, and the mechanical king was at the 9th level of the heavenly Yuan realm. Moreover, the mechanical king was the first to break through from the highest realm, and he was the first to be killed. After killing Tan Buhui, he would degenerate to the 1st level of the heavenly Yuan realm to deal with Xiang Nan. Therefore, Xiang Nan and Dream Butterfly were absolutely safe. A mere mechanical king who doesn't have any martial skills and doesn't know how to release his Yuan Qi wants to deal with this old man. Tan Buhui wasn't afraid of the mechanical king, but he was very cautious. After all, the mechanical king's cultivation was too high. If he accidentally got hit by the saber, he would probably die. The mechanical king's movements were extremely fast and decisive. Just as it walked out, it didn't even pause for a moment before taking a step forward and hacking down the giant saber. This action was extremely consistent, causing Tan Buhui to jump in fright, almost being split into two by a single blade. Tan Buhui hurriedly dodged, while the mechanical king chased after him reluctantly. With a single step, his 10-meter-long body was 20 to 30 steps away from Tan Buhui. "You're courting death." Deep in his hands, Tan Buhui sprinkled large amounts of silver needles onto the ground and shouted, "Nine Souls Fate-Chasing Formation. Now, good brother, break his formation," cried Dream Butterfly. Xiang Nan wiped his eyes with his fingers and used his lightning photoelectric eye to clearly see the Nine Souls Fate-Chasing Array eyes. Mo pointed. Xiang Nan stretched out the middle finger of his right hand and struck Mo pointed straight into the eye of the Nine Souls Fate-Chasing Formation. This time, the Nine Souls Fate-Chasing Formation was broken on the spot. This is truly a ghost." Tan Buhui's face was pale and he was so scared that he shouted, "Little bastard, how do you know formations?" Xiang Nan said in a low voice, "When you're dead, turn into a vengeful soul and ask me." Chapter 453 Blood-Stained Altar. "Who? Little bastard, you dare to plot against me? Wait for me, I'll deal with this thing and kill you." Tan Buhui hurriedly jumped into the air in fright as he dodged one of the blades and shouted, "Little bastard, you dare to plot against me? Wait for me, I'll deal with this thing and kill you again. Keep it so that you can't survive. You can't beg for death." As Tan Buhui cursed, he continuously butted his hands together in strange shapes. He can form seals. Xiang Nan was stunned for a moment, then patted his forehead and said, "I understand." It turned out that sealing was also a type of formation. Ordinary formations were set up on the ground or on the walls, but when the mastery of profound Tao experts reached a certain level, they could form seals with their hands. In other words, forming seals was actually setting up formations with both hands. However, there were advantages and disadvantages to using both hands to set up formations, and to set up formations on the ground. Although setting up the formation with both hands was simpler, it could not be stored. It had to be set up on the spot and used on the spot. That would take some time. If the time was not enough to set up the formation, the opponent might kill it. As for the formation on the ground, it could be prepared beforehand. It could be set up beforehand, and once the enemy stepped into the formation, it could be released instantly. Moreover, the success rate of setting up a formation with both hands was very low. Xiang Nan deeply understood this point. 3 bone-piercing formation. Tan Buhui finished sealing with both hands. After dodging the attack of the mechanical king's blade, he immediately landed on the ground. He pinched the seal with both hands and slammed his palm onto the ground. Immediately, the 3 bone-piercing formation was completed. A huge circular diagram appeared on the ground. Only Xiang Nan could see this diagram, but Dream Butterfly could not. However, in the center of the diagram, there was a loud boom and a spiral of cold air rose up, freezing the mechanical king into an ice sculpture. "I saw it." Xiang Nan discovered the formation eye and pointed at Mo. He broke the 3 bone-piercing formation on the spot and the mechanical king immediately walked out of the ice. "Ah! I don't believe it. I won't believe it even if I die." Tan Buhui grabbed his hair like he was crazy. This old man has been cultivating the mysterious Tao for tens of years. I can't even see through the profound mysteries of formations at a glance, but you brat can. Why? This is why. Who? Tan Buhui turned around and dodged the attack with a huge saber. He was almost mad with anger. "Brat, who is your master of the profound Tao?" As he spoke, Tan Bu Hui formed another seal with both of his hands and slammed his palm onto the ground. Boom! A pillar of flame soared into the sky, fiercely sending the mechanical king into the air. The moment Tan Bu Hui's palm landed on the ground, Xiang Nan used ENG pointed to break the formation. Tan Bu Hui had no choice but to continue setting up the formation. However, he continued to set up 7 formations. All 7 formations were destroyed by Xiang Nan immediately. Tan Bu Hui had already been forced into a corner. He began to regret it. He regretted that he shouldn't have been so reckless and directly caught up to the altar. He should be hiding under the altar, waiting for Xiang Nan to come down before launching a sneak attack. However, he was afraid that Xiang Nan would be killed by the mechanical king, and he would lose the chance to take revenge. "Brat, I'll kill you first." Tan Bu Hui's eyes were red with anger. He desperately bypassed the mechanical king and rushed towards Xiang Nan. The mechanical king turned around and raised his saber, chasing after Tan Bu Hui from behind. "I've been waiting for a long time, just waiting for you to come." Xiang Nan's eyes flashed with a bright light as he shouted, "Finger of tribulation." Tan Bu Hui was scared out of his wits. However, he was now rushing towards Xiang Nan on his own initiative. Because of his huge inertia, it was very difficult for him to dodge. In addition, there was the mechanical king chasing after him. Tan Bu Hui was hit by the Black Finger Force. His realm had instantly declined from the 4th level of Heavenly Yuan to the 3rd level of Heavenly Yuan. The instant the realm fell, Tan Bu Hui's sprinting speed also slowed down. The mechanical king who was chasing behind him slashed down with a knife and directly slashed Tan Bu Hui's waist on the spot. Tan Bu Hui's body was split in half, and his upper body fell under Xiang Nan's feet with a pu sound. His pupils were slowly dilating, and he said in disbelief, "This? Why on earth is this?" Cough, Tan Bu Hui actually died at the hands of a 5th level origin returning realm, yellow-haired brat. No. Tan Bu Hui hurriedly used both of his hands to protect Xiang Nan's legs and pleaded, "Let me live. I'm old. I haven't been able to leave any heirs in my life. I still don't want to die." In the face of Fang Zhi's death, the current Tan Bu Hui almost regretted his intestines. Tan Bu Hui turned into Tan Hui. "I'm still alive. Please, Xiang Nan, I'm begging you." Tan Bu Hui hugged Xiang Nan's legs and cried loudly. Behind him, the mechanical king had first declined to the 8th level of the Heavenly Yuan realm, because Tan Bu Hui had been reduced by 1 level by the phaseless tribulation finger. Immediately after, the mechanical king realm fell again, falling to the 1st level of the Heavenly Yuan realm. This meant that he had already determined that Tan Bu Hui would undoubtedly die, so his next target was Xiang Nan. After a person was beheaded, he could actually survive for a very long time. Beheading someone by the waist was always a cruel punishment. Xiang Nan looked down at Tan Bu Hui and gritted his teeth. "Now you know how to plead for mercy. Back then, you tortured and killed so many young people. No matter how hard they pleaded, you never let them go. Do you still remember those vengeful souls who died tragically under your soul-sacrificing formation? Not only did you torture them to death, you even refused to let go of their souls. Old bastard, you only know that your life is precious, but you trample on other people's lives like mud." Tan Bu Hui burst into tears. "I know I was wrong, I really know I was wrong. Cough, give me another chance, please give me one last chance. I will definitely spend my entire life saving people and doing good deeds to make up for my mistakes. Ha, ha ha ha. Xiang Nan looked up and smiled. You want to save people to atone for their sins? But who are the people you tortured to death to reason with? Why are they going to die, but you can atone for saving people who have nothing to do with them? Absurd, truly ridiculous. However, since you want to atone for your sins, I am willing to give you a chance. Really? Thank you, thank you, thank you so much. Tan Buhui hugged Xiang Nan's legs and thanked him endlessly. Big brother. Meng Dai anxiously stomped her feet. You can't let him go. Xiang Nan looked down at Tan Buhui condescendingly and said, since you want to atone for your sins, then go to hell. You should apologize to those souls that you tortured and killed. This is the way to atone for your sins. What? Tan Buhui was shocked. Xiang Nan took a deep breath and said, Old dog, get down. As he spoke, Xiang Nan kicked Tan Buhui away. At this moment, the mechanical king had already rushed up and was slashing down at Xiang Nan with a huge saber. This time, Tan Buhui flew between the two of them and was sliced in half by the mechanical king's saber. At that time, the infamous life-seizing miraculous doctor spilled blood on the altar. Chapter 454 Fire Burns Hell. After the mechanical king killed Tan Buhui, he kicked Tan Buhui's corpse away and charged towards Xiang Nan. Xiang Nan took a few steps back and used the phaseless tribulation finger to directly point at the first level of the Heaven Origin Realm's mechanical king to the sixth level of the Heaven Origin Realm. Sure enough, it worked. Xiang Nan was overjoyed and said, it really is a single finger that has lost 4 levels of cultivation. At this moment, Xiang Nan had used the phaseless tribulation finger twice in a row. His cultivation had declined to the 4th level of origin return, but he was only 2 levels lower than the mechanical king. The mechanical king's body stiffened for a moment before charging towards Xiang Nan again. Xiang Nan rushed forward one after another, raising his saber in his hand. This saber was extremely domineering, directly splitting the giant saber in the mechanical king's hand into 2 halves. Even the mechanical king was slashed at the waist by this saber. As a result, a purple prismatic crystal fell at Xiang Nan's feet. After seeing the crystal stone, Xiang Nan sucked in a breath of cold air and said in shock, Mica purple crystal stone. This is a treasure for refining high-grade earth soldiers. Meng Dai clapped her hands and smiled. Xiang Nan picked up the amethyst and held it in his hand to confirm. Finally, he nodded and said, that's right, it's it. This is the main ingredient of my thunder-resisting mixed prescription. Xiang Nan was happy, not because amethyst could refine high-grade earth weapons, but because his lightning-resistant mixture required 3 kinds of materials, and mica amethyst was one of them. I didn't expect that by chance, I would actually be able to obtain it here. Great, this trip to the Devil's Sea has yielded quite a lot of benefits, which made Xiang Nan very satisfied. Do we still need to break through the second ring altar? Meng Dai hurriedly asked. No, I can't beat him. Xiang Nan shook his head. If he had absorbed by Yen lightning, he would really be able to fight. However, it was no longer possible. In the second ring, any ordinary puppet was in existence at the first level of the Heavenly Yuan Realm, while the Mechanical King was at the second level of the Heavenly Yuan Realm. No matter how conceited Xiang Nan was, it was impossible for him to be so stupid as to venture into such a dangerous place. Although the phaseless tribulation finger was useful, what should he do when facing 256 first-level Heavenly Yuan puppets? Moreover, the other 2 main ingredients of the lightning-resistant mixture formula were of the same grade as mica amethyst, so it was impossible for them to appear in the altar of the second ring. What a pity! If you can get the materials for the second ring mechanism King's forging, you can turn your dragon blood saber into a heavenly armament. Meng Dai shook her head regretfully. Xiang Nan smiled and said, "We need to know our limits. We can only be reckless and put ourselves to death." Death had always been a major cause of death for martial artists. "Let's go." Xiang Nan wrapped his arms around Dream Butterfly's waist and sprinted towards the central passageway. Tan Bu Hui is an expert in the profound Tao. He has a way to deal with the happy atmosphere in blissful hell, so he came very quickly, he said. But I think he must have met Dong Wushang and Mo Rusher along the way. He should have helped those two people. We reckon that it will take Dong Wushang and the other 24 hours to get here. It looks like this time will be greatly shortened. Just as the two of them arrived at the entrance to the next level of the tunnel, a heart-wrenching roar suddenly came from within Lin Hai. "Xiang Nan! Get out of here! Dong Wushang!" Xiang Nan and Dream Butterfly exchanged glances and their hearts sank. "How did you get here so quickly?" Fast forward. Xiang Nan hugged the Dream Butterfly and rushed into the space-time passageway. The next level was 120,000 years ago, and it was also the fourth level of the Devil Sea. After landing, the two of them appeared at the edge of a desert. In front of them was a stone tablet that read, "Fire burns hell. It's so hot here." As soon as Dream Butterfly entered, she pulled up her collar and continued to fan the wind inside. Xiang Nan could also feel that the two of them were only at the edge of the desert, and they were already feeling extremely hot and dry. He didn't know what kind of scene would happen in the depths of the desert. Then will Dong Wushang catch up immediately? Meng Dai asked. Xiang Nan shook his head. He didn't discover us. Although the chain lock can directly enter the altar without going through it, Dong Wushang didn't know that we had already reached the 4th floor. He will be searching for us on the 3rd floor, one altar at a time. We still have some time. But no matter what, we have to speed up our pace. If we stay here for too long, we might be met by Dong Wushang, who is catching up to us. Xiang Nan forcefully picked up the Dream Butterfly and rushed into the depths of the desert. This desert is extremely hot. As soon as Xiang Nan entered the desert, he felt a surge of heat. His face was also burning hot. This feeling was even hotter than standing in the crater of a volcano. He looked worriedly at Dream Butterfly and discovered that although Dream Butterfly did not have a realm, the degree of dryness and heat was similar to his own. In other words, the dryness and heat effects caused by this desert for martial artists of different strengths decreased with the realm. If it weren't for this, according to Dream Butterfly's mortal body that didn't have a realm, its entire body would have already burned. Drink some water. Xiang Nan took out a jar of water from his storage ring and fed it to Dream Butterfly. But what was even worse was that as soon as the lid of the water jar was opened, the clear water inside wildly evaporated, turning into large amounts of water vapor that rose into the sky. Xiang Nan hurriedly condensed his yuan qi into a ball to protect the water jar, but he was still unable to stop the evaporation of the clear water. Dream Butterfly only drank a dozen mouthfuls of water, but less than half of the water had evaporated. Drink a few mouthfuls and seal it. Meng Dai hurriedly hugged the water jar with her body and said, "I'm fine. I can still hold on. Don't open the water jar until I have no other choice. It doesn't matter to me." Xiang Nan shook his head and said, "I have the 9 purities cosmos skill. My resistance to fire is very strong. I can endure it for a period of time." As he spoke, he sealed the water jar again, put it into his storage ring, and then continued forward. He put up an arbor in his hand and looked into the distance. This great desert was boundless and could not be seen to the end. The sun in the sky was a little bigger than the sun outside, ruthlessly exposing this space-time region. The two of them walked out of the desert without any reference for an entire day. During the dream butterfly period, they almost fainted several times. Xiang Nan could only take out the water jar again and drink water for her 4 times. Because of these few drinks, the water jars in Xiang Nan's storage ring had been crippled by as much as 2 jars. Although Xiang Nan was very cautious and kept food and fresh water in his storage ring all year round, there were only 5 jars of fresh water in his storage ring. Because he could find water everywhere in the outside world, he did not worry about water. It's only been a day. We've wasted 2 jars of water. We can't continue to waste it like this. Meng Dai's lips were dry and she said weakly. The two of them continued to move forward. On the night of the second day, a strange scenery began to appear in the distance. The scenery caused Xiang Nan to feel a wave of despair. Looking around, there were sparks of flames everywhere, and they were very conspicuous under the night sky. Shit! Xiang Nan swallowed his saliva and felt his throat dry. It was as if his throat was about to stick together. Any swallowing motion made him feel so sticky that it hurt. The flames in the distance were actually the flames that burned in the desert. Chapter 455 in Human Behavior. This kind of damn place doesn't grow vegetation. What is burning? Xiang Nan ran with Dream Butterfly in his arms. In this environment, the physical consumption of humans is far more than usual. Hot air not only destroy the human body, but also destroy their will. It was only when they approached that they discovered that this desert was mixed with a large amount of first-grade phosphorite powder. Once these powders reached a fixed temperature, they would burn out of thin air. As a result, flames could be seen burning everywhere in this desert region. Because of this, the temperature here was a notch higher than the outer reaches of the desert. Even Xiang Nan's boots were burned by the boiling hot sand when he stepped on them. This temperature is too exaggerated. Xiang Nan was helpless and could only walk barefoot in the desert. He didn't even dare to put the Dream Butterfly down. She was afraid that just as she put down the Dream Butterfly, it would be burned into a fiery man by the boiling sand. Desert days and nights are usually very hot during the day and cold at night, but this is not the case here. The temperature here at night was not any lower than it was during the day. It was dry and hot during the day and stuffy at night. The little bird was already curled up in Xiang Nan's embrace, so hot that it was drowsy, while the Dream Butterfly was carried behind Xiang Nan, covering her body with a cloak. 2 days later, Xiang Nan's endurance finally reached its limit, and the 9 Purities Cosmos skill was unable to persevere any longer. He could only ruthlessly take out the 3rd jar of water, poke open a small hole in the mouth of the jar, directly plug his mouth, and suck water into his mouth towards the hole. This way, although the water would evaporate a little slower, it was only a little. Even if it was wrapped in a jar, the temperature would still allow the water inside to evaporate through the surface of the jar. This situation was simply unreasonable, just as clear water could pierce through Xiang Nan's yuan qi and evaporate into water vapor. Xiang Nan quickly drank a few mouthfuls of water and hurriedly put the water jar back into his storage ring. He only hated that he usually stored too little water. Taking advantage of the darkness, Xiang Nan walked forward in the desert with 1 foot deep and 1 foot shallow. His newly lubricated throat became thirsty again. He could only walk while quietly circulating the 9 Purities Cosmos skill. When dawn arrived, Xiang Nan woke up Dream Butterfly and fed her some water. As a result, less than half of the 3rd jar of water was left. When a ray of dawn appeared in the sky, Xiang Nan's footsteps stopped. Not far to the left, there was a group of people either sitting or lying on the ground. Xiang Nan frowned and walked closer. He was stunned by what he saw in front of him. It was Sima Nantian and the others. At this moment, there were only 3 Wu Yuanli martial artists captured by Sima Nantian. One was Mingyu Yuan, one was a Scarlet Tiger martial artist, and one was a Black Flag martial artist. There were only 3 people left here, including Sima Nantian, Chu Yu, and another man. Mingyu Yuan and the others were already half dead from thirst. They were tied to one side by a rope, and they were as angry as a gossamer. On the other hand, Sima Nantian and another disciple of the vast mist sect had dried blood stains on their lips. That Chu Yu was lying on a person's body, as if she was kissing that person's neck. However, from a closer look, it turned out that Chu Yu was sucking on that person's blood. It was a Scarlet Tiger martial artist. He lay motionless on the ground, and a cut was made to his neck. Chu Yu was pointing her mouth at the cut and gulping down a large mouthful of Scarlet Tiger martial artist's blood. "Damn it, you bastards!" Xiang Nan was furious and roared, "You actually suck human blood. It's you." Sima Nantian was overjoyed when he saw Xiang Nan. "Huh?" Chu Yu turned around to look at Xiang Nan. The corners of her mouth were still dripping with bright red blood. Xiang Nan shouted, "Are you still human? To think that you would be able to do such an unscrupulous thing." "Ha!" Chu Yu was overjoyed and shouted, "Brother Sima, it's that Xiang Nan. Quickly kill him and steal his water. He must be carrying clear water with him." Sima Nantian hadn't even waited for Chu Yu to finish her sentence and had already rushed towards Xiang Nan. "Water, water. I want water." Sima Nantian jumped up and roared, "Cloud-traversing ladder." This brat was so thirsty that he lost his mind. He immediately released his powerful ladder of the cloud's martial skill as soon as he got up. Xiang Nan was not willing to be outdone. He roared, "Release him. I have water here, I can save your lives." Xiang Nan used a move of the Azure Dragon to go out to sea and collide with the vertical ladder. The last time the two of them fought, Sima Nantian's vertical ladder pushed the Azure Dragon out of the sea. But this time, the two sides were evenly matched. When Xiang Nan's Azure Dragon went out to sea, its Yuan Qi was nearly doubled by the Dragon Blood Saber. Under the two's bombardment, Zhongyan ladder was forced on the spot, and Xiang Nan's Azure Dragon sea exit was also cancelled out. "What?" Sima Nantian was stunned, "Your Yuan Qi strength. Brother Sima, why are you still so soft-hearted? Kill him." That Chu Yu shouted anxiously. She thought that Sima Nantian was deliberately letting Xiang Nan water. "You vicious witch, shut up." Xiang Nan was furious. He pointed at Chu Yu and said, "Along the way, it was you who stirred up trouble." Chu Yu picked up the corpse of the Scarlet Tiger martial cultivator. She glared at Xiang Nan resentfully and continued to stick her mouth on it, gulping down large mouthfuls of blood. "You're courting death." Xiang Nan immediately rushed towards Chu Yu. Sima Nantian slipped to Xiang Nan's side and turned into dust. "Who?" Sima Nantian's heavy leg fiercely swept towards Xiang Nan. Xiang Nan raised his saber to block, and with a crisp sound, the Dragon Blood Saber was kicked to the point of trembling. Sima Nantian's leg was bounced back by the Dragon Blood Saber. "What? Your saber has changed." Sima Nantian was astonished. Xiang Nan slashed down with his saber. A fierce saber light slashed towards Sima Nantian's chest. Sima Nantian quickly dodged, but was heavily smashed to the ground by Xiang Nan's punch. Cough. Sima Nantian coughed out a mouthful of blood. Something's wrong with your Yuan Qi. Xiang Nan raised his saber and landed, wanting to kill Sima Nantian. At this moment, an even faster arrow flew over and shot towards the sand beside Sima Nantian, sending Sima Nantian flying. Chu Yu stretched her bow and aimed it at Xiang Nan. Xiang Nan roared, "Are you deaf? I said I have water. Let Ming Yu Yuan and the others go. Any one of mine can save everyone's lives." Chu Yu's beautiful face was already distorted to the point that it did not look like it. She said viciously, "Who wants to share it with you? Your water is all ours." "What a bunch of beasts!" Xiang Nan said angrily. Chu Yu pulled the bowstring repeatedly, and sharp arrows flew towards Xiang Nan. The Yuan Qi on those arrows was fierce, and they actually shot out a ring of circular clouds. Every time the ring of clouds appeared, it was accompanied by a slight explosion of air. At this time, the speed of the arrow's flight would rise by another level. "Cloud-breaking arrow!" Chu Yu shouted. Right at this moment, behind Chu Yu, an afterimage suddenly flashed past. The vampired scarlet tiger martial cultivator's corpse suddenly disappeared. Chapter 456 The Fourth Day. "Ah, it's him." Chu Yu's face suddenly turned pale. At this moment, she no longer paid attention to Xiang Nan. Instead, she nervously grabbed the longbow and kept pointing in all directions, as if she was looking for someone. "Let's go." Sima Nantian also ran over and shouted anxiously. "Run." "Where to?" A voice sounded behind Xiang Nan. Xiang Nan had already sensed an aura behind him. As the person behind him spoke, Xiang Nan had already turned around. However, he saw a man around 18 or 19 years old. He was 2 meters tall, carrying the corpse of a scarlet tiger martial cultivator in one hand, with blood stains on his mouth. Behind him was a slender black saber that was only 2 fingers wide but 2 meters long. It possessed the 6th level of origin returning realm. This person's long hair was loose, and 2 strands of black hair fell from his temples to his shoulders. His appearance had a different kind of gentle and gloomy beauty. "And Xiaoman," Sima Nantian said angrily, "you have already killed my 2 junior brothers. Are you still unwilling to let us go?" That person was originally called An Xiaoman. Obviously, he stole the corpse of the scarlet tiger martial artist to suck blood. An Xiaoman said, "Sima Nantian, aren't you known as the first day's young genius of the Blue Tide continent? Why are you afraid of me, the 4th genius of the 9 firmaments continent?" "Ha! Your Blue Tide continent has always been famous for its abundance of trash. How can you compare to our the 9 firmaments continent?" Although An Xiaoman was talking to Sima Nantian, his eyes were always looking at Xiang Nan's storage ring. Sima Nantian's lips trembled and he angrily said, "You killed my 2 junior brothers, but I didn't get even with you. Don't bully others too much. Isn't your martial artists from the 9 firmaments continent too unreasonable?" And Xiaoman casually tossed the corpse of the scarlet tiger martial cultivator aside. He pointed at Xiang Nan and said, "I'm not in the mood to talk nonsense with you now. This brat belongs to me. The storage ring in his hand and his water belong to me." Chu Yu said angrily, "We discovered this Xiang Nan first. His water is half ours." This Chu Yu had always been unreasonable, but when she faced An Xiaoman, she took the initiative to say that she only wanted half of the water in Xiang Nan, which meant that she was still very afraid of An Xiaoman. "Hey, half of you. Then come and get it." And Xiaoman pulled out the long black saber behind him and didn't even have the mood to greet Xiang Nan as he rushed towards Xiang Nan. Obviously, the two of them had already tacitly treated Xiang Nan as a lamb to be slaughtered, as if they could divide it up at will. Xiang Nan immediately blocked with his saber. Halfway through the slash, and Xiaoman's black saber suddenly burned and turned into a long flaming saber. Boom! The black saber struck Xiang Nan's giant saber, shaking Xiang Nan back more than 10 meters. However, and Xiaoman did not retreat even half a step. He raised his eyebrows slightly. Where did this wild brat come from? He can actually resist my saber. As he spoke, the dust beneath Xiaoman's feet suddenly turned into a cyclone. Then, with a flash of his body, he came closer to Xiang Nan. The black saber in his hand burned brightly as he slashed towards Xiang Nan once again. Xiang Nan frowned. He refined qi into lightning, wrapping the huge saber around the sharp lightning and hacking it back. Clang! The two blades collided at the same time. This time, Xiang Nan did not take half a step back, while Xiaoman took a walk. He was shocked. Oh! Chu Yu and Sima Nantian exchanged glances. They both saw the incredulity in each other's eyes. The last time they fought against Xiang Nan was not Sima Nantian's opponent. And this time, Xiang Nan was actually able to force Xiaoman back. Xiang Nan frowned and looked behind him. It was too dangerous to carry the dream butterfly on his back. If anything went wrong, it might threaten the life of the dream butterfly. Xiang Nan took a deep breath and put dream butterfly down from her cloak. Then, she waved her right hand and used the alchemy cage to cover dream butterfly. Miss Meng Dai. Sima Nantian was overjoyed. When he saw dream butterfly, he was overjoyed. Kid. And Xiaoman looked at Xiang Nan and said, "What is your background? Tell me your name." Xiang Nan saw that this person's clothes were similar to Sima Nantian's and should be a martial artist from 80,000 years ago. He said, "Blue Tide Continent, nature's vast sect. Chi, I've never heard of anything before. Perhaps it's a small sect that doesn't belong to the upper echelons." And Xiaoman lazily carried the black saber on his shoulder and said, "Your strength is not bad. If we meet normally, I don't want to provoke someone like you. But now that we are in the fire-burning hell and are dying in the sky, you can honestly hand over your water. I can pretend that I have never seen you before." Xiang Nan glanced at the unconscious dream butterfly, then turned to look at Xiaoman and said, "I still have 2 jars of water. I can give you 1 jar." Xiang Nan and Xiaoman had never known each other, and he remembered the purpose of the Haran sect in his heart, so he was moved by kindness. And Xiaoman smiled brightly and said, "That's right, you have a good heart. I asked for water from you, but you really want to give it to me, but it's a pity. 1 jar of water is not enough. I want both of your jars." "Impossible. You and I are both martial artists. If you ask for help from me, I won't let you die. However, it's a bit too much for you to ask for 2 jars of water." Xiang Nan rejected. Sigh. And Xiaoman sighed and shook his head. What a good young man. He is kind-hearted and strong. Unfortunately, for Qing Shui, I can only kill you and forcefully snatch him away. As he spoke, a flash of fire flashed through Xiaoman's eyes. Then, with a sound from Peng, his entire body started to burn. The flames on his body were actually 3 different colors: dark green, cyan, and pale green. 3 meridians fire. Xiang Nan's heart sank. Some martial artists possessed multiple innate talent meridians, but some had different grades of innate talent meridians. This En Xiaoman was like this. He possessed 3 types of meridians: heaven-grade fire veins, earth-grade fire veins, and spirit-grade fire veins. All 3 meridians belonged to the fire meridian, and this talent was extremely rare. You know you're scared. En Xiaoman's eyes flashed with excitement. I like killing geniuses the most. As he spoke, En Xiaoman jumped up and the black saber in his hand descended from the sky. The black saber was burning with raging flames. The flames from the 3 meridians had been stimulated to an unbelievable level of heat. When the fire saber was about to land, the sand on the ground was instantly crystallized. All of them had turned into tiny crystalline particles. No wonder Sima Nantian and the others were so afraid of En Xiaoman. Xiang Nan felt like he was bathed in a sea of fire. The terrifying temperature made it difficult for him to breathe. Clang! En Xiaoman's saber landed on Xiang Nan's giant saber. In an instant, under the enormous collision force, the 3 kinds of green flames sprayed out into the sky. As for the lightning on Xiang Nan's saber, because of this squeezing force, it exploded fiercely on both sides. Xiang Nan slid backwards 3 meters, while En Xiaoman was shaken so much that he flipped backwards 5 or 6 times and shouted, "All right. He actually blocked my saber." Chapter 457 Broken Jade. Hee, it's getting more and more interesting. En Xiaoman rushed to the ground without the slightest hesitation. Xiang Nan wielded his saber and immediately fought with him. En Xiaoman slashed at Xiang Nan's huge saber, and then his body soared into the air. He actually used both of his legs to grab Xiang Nan's neck, wanting to use a pair of scissors legs to cut Xiang Nan out. Xiang Nan raised his leg high and kicked En Xiaoman on the back of his waist. He kicked En Xiaoman to the point that his legs were weak and his scissors were ineffective. En Xiaoman twisted his body and slashed the black saber at Xiang Nan's neck. Xiang Nan blocked it with a huge saber and pointed at En Xiaoman's left knee with a finger from IMMORTAL's left hand. En Xiaoman knelt on one knee with a splash, but the long saber in his hand tilted upwards, sending a flaming saber light flying. Xiang Nan abruptly slid back 5 meters. At the same time, the giant saber slashed down. The first move of the Yang Flame Saber technique landed. The flame-marked saber light collided with En Xiaoman's flame saber light, and the 2 saber lights cancelled out on the spot. En Xiaoman spread out his hands and retreated gently. Behind him, a faint phantom of a fire bird appeared. Shattered jade! En Xiaoman roared. He could only hear a clang sound in the air. The air made the sound of a mirror shattering. What was even stranger was that cracks appeared in the air like cracks in mirrors. The shattered air from each crack was like a mirror, illuminating Xiang Nan's reflection. En Xiaoman slashed down with his saber, and the 3 kinds of flames condensed into a fire bird. The fire bird let out a sharp howl and flapped its wings as it flew towards Xiang Nan. The fire bird was too terrifying. Every time it flapped its wings, it would flap out 2 flaming whirlwinds. Xiang Nan slashed down at the firebird. The sharp lightning saber light flew out and was about to hit the firebird, but the firebird fell into an air mirror and disappeared. At the same time, the firebird rushed out of an air mirror behind Xiang Nan. Xiang Nan's reaction was extremely fast. He immediately turned around and slashed backwards. The firebird then drilled into another air mirror. When its front half drilled into the mirror, only its tail was exposed. At the same time, in the air mirror on Xiang Nan's left, the firebird's front half had already emerged. What a peculiar martial skill! Xiang Nan's heart skipped a beat as he hurriedly slashed out a streak of lightning towards the firebird's head in the mirror on his left. This time, the fire bird actually retracted and retreated from the mirror on Xiang Nan's left side, appearing from behind the mirror on Xiang Nan's back. As for Xiang Nan's saber light, it struck the mirror surface this time, and his saber light actually drilled into the mirror surface as well. What? Just as Xiang Nan was stunned, he suddenly felt a blade light hitting his back. Boom! Xiang Nan's back exploded with lightning, blasting him forward. The saber light that hit Xiang Nan's back was actually his own saber light. This thing, Xiang Nan felt a burning pain behind his back. Fortunately, the blade light was emitted by him, and its attributes were exactly the same as his own. Otherwise, he would probably be seriously injured. Amazing? And Xiamen chuckled and said, "This is a martial skill I found from fire burning hell." Sima Nantian and Dream Butterfly exchanged glances. Dream Butterfly cried out, "My God, and Xiamen has become stronger again. Before he became stronger, we were no match for him. Now, aren't we going to let him slaughter us?" Xiang Nan's heart was heavy as the fire bird continued to shuttle through the mirrors. Xiang Nan observed carefully. The mirrors surrounding his body were scattered in all directions. There were a total of 7 of them. "Come, come and fight me again." And Xiamen chopped out a flaming saber light. This saber light drilled into one mirror surface and rushed out from the other mirror surface. And Xiamen raised his left index finger and lightly wrapped it around it. The 7 air mirrors immediately changed directions. The saber light that was originally flying to Xiang Nan's left rushed out and flew towards Xiang Nan's back when the mirror turned. Xiang Nan slashed away in Xiamen's saber light and slashed 3 times at Xiamen. And Xiamen waved his finger, and the 7 mirrors immediately changed positions, just in time to intercept the 3 lightning blades. Once the 3 bolts of lightning entered the mirror, they charged out from the mirror on Xiang Nan's right and shot towards Xiang Nan. Xiang Nan hurriedly blocked with his giant saber. He was struck by his 3 sabers, causing his body to slide backwards to the left. In the mirror on the left, the fire bird that had been waiting for an opportunity for a long time finally rushed out. Xiang Nan held the saber lattice in his right hand to block his saber light, while his left hand struck the great way to a palm. When the fire bird was released by Xiamen, the fire bird phantom appeared. From this, it could be seen that its power was not trivial. Xiang Nan's palm hit the fire bird, but it was unable to cancel out the fire bird. It only made the fire bird smaller. After the fire bird paused for a moment, Xiang Nan immediately retreated. The smaller firebird's recovery speed rushed over and collided with the 3 streaks of lightning blades. After a violent explosion, the lightning and flames engulfed the sky and cancelled each other out. What a quick reaction speed! And Xiamen's expression changed as he exclaimed, "This kid is not simple. He can actually move so much space in such an extreme environment. What's going on?" Chu Yu said in disbelief. This Xiang Nan, when he fought with brother Sima, his Yuan Qi was far less powerful than it is now. Could it be that he also found some kind of Qi refining technique in the chain lock? Any martial skill had a duration, and the same was true for Shattered Jade. At this moment, the 7 air mirrors gradually disappeared. Shattered Jade. And Xiamen released the Shattered Jade martial skill once more, and the air gave off a crisp clanging sound, splitting into 7 mirrors. "Huh, your name is Xiang Nan, right? This move of mine, Shattered Jade, is inexplicable. No matter how powerful your martial skill is, it will be reflected by my Shattered Jade mirror." And Xiamen laughed proudly. Obviously, he was very confident in his new martial skill. The martial skill from 120,000 years ago is truly unimaginable. Xiang Nan frowned and nodded, but you think too highly of this kind of martial skill. It's just a small skill. Sculpture tricks. What a big breath. Since it's a sculpture tricks, why don't you break it? Xiang Nan tilted his head slightly and observed the positions of the 7 mirrors. He retreated, and the mirrors also retreated, following him all the time. The corner of Xiang Nan's mouth rose slightly as he slashed forward with a streak of lightning saber light. The saber light aimed at the gap between the mirrors and flew towards Xiaoman. Huh, I already said that this is useless. Xiaoman raised his left index finger and gently circled it. At the same time, Xiang Nan also slashed backwards with a blade light. The 7 mirrors quickly moved. One of them moved in front of Xiang Nan, retracting Xiang Nan's saber light and hacking towards Xiang Nan from the left. The saber light that Xiang Nan chopped behind him was caught by the displacement of the mirror. From the mirror on the right, the saber light shot towards Xiaoman. Even if Xiang Nan had already recovered from all this, his body flashed and he easily dodged his saber light. However, Xiaoman hadn't expected the other blade light. When the lightning blade light flew over, Xiaoman was shocked and hurriedly used the black blade lattice to block it. Boom! Xiaoman blocked too late. A third of the lightning explosion had already struck Xiaoman's chest. Xiaoman's body suddenly straightened and his muscles began to spasm from the intense lightning force. Chapter 458 Battle in the Sand Sea. Xiaoman was struck by lightning, and the 7 mirrors instantly disappeared. Sima Nantian and Chu Yu were both dumbfounded. How did you calculate this? Isn't that brat's brain too useful? Sima Nantian said in shock. Chu Yu blurted out, he has already calculated that Xiaoman will move the mirror, and he has also calculated the direction of the mirror's deflection. Thus, he slashed out with a saber from the front and a saber from the back. Xiaoman wanted to move the mirror in order to deal with the saber light on the front, but in the end, he was used by the saber on the back. Sima Nantian said, this kind of shattered jade martial skill is indeed flawed. Ah! Shattered jade. Wrapped in lightning, Xiaoman still forcefully released the broken jade for the 3rd time. Xiang Nan slashed forward, left and right. Xiaoman hurriedly circled his fingers. The 7 mirrors moved at the same time. The first blade was refracted back and shot towards Xiang Nan himself. The second blade tilted and shot behind Xiang Nan. However, Xiang Nan calculated the 3rd blade accurately and slashed towards Xiaoman. Xiaoman was prepared and hurriedly used the black saber to block. However, the moment he blocked, Xiang Nan's 4th saber slashed down and a saber light flew out from between the 2 mirrors. Boom! Xiaoman blocked the first blade. In order to block it, he lost control of the mirror. Xiang Nan's 4th blade hit Xiaoman's black blade again. Xiaoman blocked the first strike. The black saber had already been deflected. The 4th strike made up for it. When the lightning exploded, 1/3 of the lightning struck him. Xiaoman was struck by lightning again, and his eyes rolled from the lightning. His entire body trembled and his mirror shattered. Xiang Nan took the opportunity to charge forward and cut Xiaoman off with a single slash. However, wind howled from behind, and Xiang Nan could only dodge immediately. He saw an arrow piercing through the air and flying towards Xiang Nan's left arm. Brother Sima, hurry up. This brat's strength has increased dramatically. We can't let him kill Xiaoman. Otherwise, the next one to die will be us. Chu Yu shouted. Sima Nantian had already rushed up and landed heavily on Xiang Nan's shoulder with his whip leg. Xiang Nan raised his great saber and Sima Nanshan's whip leg swept across the blade, producing a muffled buzzing sound. Sima Nanshan's kick was supposed to sweep Xiang Nan horizontally out, but Xiang Nan's Yuan Qi was already different from before. Instead, it actually bounced Sima Nantian back. Yang Flame Saber Technique. Xiang Nan held the giant saber in his hand and unleashed his first move towards Sima Nantian, instantly hacking out 7 rays of flame mark saber light. Sima Nantian soared into the air. His legs were like shadows, continuously exploding with Xiang Nan's saber light. However, he sucked in a breath of cold air in pain. He only felt that his right leg was shaken to the point that his muscles were about to cramp. The power of this saber light is too frightening. Sima Nantian grinned and used his strength to jump higher into the air. From top to bottom, he struck Xiang Nan with his palm. The power of that palm transformed into rolling white clouds, and a white cloud's palm descended from the sky. And Xiamen also recovered from the stalemate. He and Sima Nantian wrapped up Xiang Nan together and threw a giant firebird at Xiang Nan. Lei, the Azure Dragon, is out at sea. Behind Xiang Nan, a gigantic dragon head phantom appeared. Hiss. I'm not mistaken, am I, dragon? And Xiamen paled in shock. What kind of damn martial skill is this? It can actually activate the Azure Dragon phenomenon. Xiang Nan's Azure Dragon charged out of the sea. The sharp lightning saber light actually cut the firebird in half. Sima Nanshan's Baiyun palm was about to land on the ground, and with a wave of his right hand, Baiyun palm immediately transformed into a horizontal movement. He chased after Xiang Nan and flew over. After Xiang Nan's Azure Dragon went out to slash the firebird, he forcefully turned around and slashed his saber at his back. A 20-meter saber light shot out from the ground. Half of that white cloud palm. Flash shadow steps. Xiang Nan disappeared and appeared behind Sima Nantian. Sima Nantian sensed danger with the keen premonition of an expert. He hurriedly turned around and swept his leg towards Xiang Nan behind him. Xiang Nan Peng's Weitua palm slapped Sima Nanshan's knee and forcefully pushed his leg back. Then, he twisted his waist and slashed down with a slash. Whoosh! An arrow flew out and exploded on Sima Nanshan's left side. The explosive force sent Sima Nantian flying, dodging Xiang Nan's fatal slash. Xiang Nan did not want to fight. He turned around and smashed the hilt of his saber to the left. Coincidentally, and Xiamen had already bypassed them to prepare for a sneak attack, but Xiang Nan's saber hilt smashed into the black saber. Clang! Xiang Nan used the hilt to smash in Xiamen's black blade. And Xiamen's black saber was pushed down. Xiang Nan's huge saber stood up because of the force on the hilt of the saber. Xiang Nan took advantage of the situation to attack, and the edge of the saber went straight towards Xiamen's face. Boom! Heavenly Fire Fist. And Xiamen retreated in panic. After dodging a knife, he threw a fire fist at Xiang Nan. A large flaming fist rushed towards Xiang Nan. Xiang Nan instantly landed on the ground with a flash step. Behind him, Sima Nanshan's white cloud's palm also rushed over. This time, the fire fist collided with the cloud palm. The cloud palm was instantly blasted apart, and the fire fist shrank by 2/3. However, the remaining 1/3 hit Sima Nanshan's chest, leaving behind a large concave palm print on his chest. Pooh! Sima Nanshan's Yuan Qi was not as strong as Xiamen's, and he was instantly spat out blood and sent flying. Brother Sima! Chu Yu was furious. She pulled back her bowstring and shouted, "Break the cloud 3 strikes." Whoosh whoosh! The 3 Yuan Qi arrows flew toward Xiang Nan. The Yuan Qi arrows were condensed with Yuan Qi, and the material seemed to be made from black clouds. Xiang Nan slashed 3 times at the 3 arrows in a row. However, the 3 Yuan Qi arrows suddenly exploded in the air with 3 loud bangs. 3 circular clouds spread out at the middle of the 3 arrows, causing the arrows to instantly accelerate. The arrow had already crossed before the saber light could reach Xiang Nan's chest. And Xiaoman dodged to the left of Xiang Nan. The black saber chopped and 5 rays of flaming saber light greeted him. Ray, the raptor waved its tail. Xiang Nan took a horse step in the air and swept his huge saber across the sky, slashing out with a huge full moon saber light. The 3 arrows were struck by the violent lightning saber light. Without even a chance to struggle, they would collapse. Meanwhile, Xiaoman's flaming saber light was similarly annihilated by the fierce dragon swinging its tail. Ah! Xiaoman and Chu Yu shouted at the same time. They jumped up one after another and dodged the fatal slash. Xiang Nan pointed at Xiaoman and instantly pointed at the power of IMMORTAL's index finger 7 times. Furthermore, he didn't even look at it and quickly arrived behind Chu Yu with a flash step. Then, he slashed down with a knife. Xiaoman dodged in panic, dodging 5 fingers in a row, but was pierced through his left knee and right shoulder by the other 2 fingers. Chu Yu quickly turned around and used her longbow to block Xiang Nan's saber slash. Unfortunately, Xiang Nan's attack came too quickly, leaving Chu Yu with no time to condense her Yuan Qi on the longbow. With this strike, the longbow was actually split in half by Xiang Nan, and Xiang Nan took a step forward to make up for it. At this moment, the disciples of the vast mist sect who had been watching from the sidelines turned into afterimages and rushed out. They hugged Chu Yu and immediately ran. Run! We are no match for this brat. Which way? Xiang Nan used his avatar seal and split out 2 avatars. At the same time, he slashed out 12 slashes into the sky. Thunder, dragon shocking sunshine. A towering saber light that was 50 meters tall chased after him. Xiaoman raised his black saber high and chopped out a fiery bear that was running wildly in the air. Sima Nantian soared into the sky and kicked out more than a dozen conical leg lights. Chu Yu used her Yuan Qi to connect the broken bow and fired 14 arrows in a row. The other male disciple of the vast mist sect exploded with Yuan Qi and threw a giant white cloud's fist at Xiang Nan. The fire berserk bear, the leg light, the Yuan Qi arrow, the white cloud giant fist, and the martial skills of the 4 masters simultaneously struck dragon shocking sunshine. Boom! A huge mushroom cloud soared into the sky, and a terrifying wave of air sent all 4 of them flying. Chapter 459. Be benevolent and righteous. Pooh! Xiaoman and Sima Nantian were engulfed by the shockwave. Chu Yu and the male disciple were weak and vomited blood on the spot. Xiaoman and Sima Nantian resisted the terrifying shockwave, bringing the 2 people who vomited blood together and fleeing into the distance. This shockwave was too powerful. It was caused by the combined efforts of 5 people. Even Xiang Nan himself did not dare to take it lightly. He acted as if even a single move of thunder, azure dragon out of the sea was enough. He directly rushed out from the shock wave, splitting open a crack in the shock wave, and then he drew his saber and slashed into the sky. Taking advantage of the instant the shock wave was split by the blade light, Xiang Nan's figure quickly ran, wrapping up the dream butterfly, Mingyu Yuan, Black Flag, and Scarlet Tiger martial practitioners with Yuan Qi. He quickly ran wildly and escaped from the danger zone. The distant desert. Damn it, Damn it. And Xiamen grabbed Sima Nanshan's collar and roared, "You idiot! Who did you provoke? With the strength of 4 of us, we can barely block his saber." Sima Nantian was already stunned. He couldn't say a word. He hadn't expected Xiang Nan to suddenly become so strong. "Let go of my brother Sima." Chuyu rushed forward and forcefully broken Xiamen's hand, shouting, "Did we provoke him? Don't tell me you didn't want to steal his water yourself. Who exactly is he?" And Xiamen roared, "There are no such strong peers in the Blue Tide continent." Sima Nantian regained his senses and patted in Xiamen's hand, saying, "He is not from our time. He comes from the future." And Xiamen frowned, "Since that's the case, then it's not too late to report the conflict between us after we leave the Devil's Sea. At this critical moment, we have to work together to deal with that brat. We absolutely cannot separate. Otherwise, none of us will survive. Come, drink water." Xiang Nan still had 2.5 jars of water. He poured out half a jar of water and quickly fed it to Meng Dai, Mingyu Yuan, and the others. Mingyu Yuan weakly opened her eyes and forced a smile. "Xiang Nan, why did you save me? Although we didn't hurt you and senior sister Meng Dai when we fought in the Black Forest, at least we shouldn't be considered friends. You saved us twice and told me why." Xiang Nan threw the empty water jar aside. Instead, he was extremely thirsty and subconsciously licked his dry lips. This action caused the hearts of the 2 martial artists of the Scarlet Tiger and Black Flag to ache. Xiang Nan said, "After all, we are from the same generation. I can't bear to see you being tortured to death by people from other generations. I have done my utmost to give you Qing Shui. I will not help you in the future. The 3 of you, take this jar of water and leave. Flee from the Devil's Sea. Dong Wushang's target is me. As long as the 3 of you try your best to escape, Dong Wushang and Ru won't really spend too much time chasing after you." Xiang Nan divided the remaining 2 jars of water into 1 jar. "No." Dream Butterfly hurriedly stopped him, "We only have 2 jars. It's not enough. If we give it to them again, wouldn't we die of thirst?" Needless to say, Xiang Nan shook his head and stuffed the water jar into Mingyu Yuan's embrace. "You guys go, don't come back." "Ha ha ha ha." Mingyu Yuan laughed loudly. "Everyone says that a decent martial artist is a hypocrite, a fake justice. Xiang Nan, I don't care about other decent martial artists, but you make me sincerely admire you. If you can escape from Dong Wushang's pursuit and the Devil's Sea in the future, you and I will reunite. I will treat you to a drink." Xiang Nan smiled and said, "The past is over. You can go. Xiang Nan, take care." The Scarlet Tiger and Black Flag martial practitioners cupped their fists at Xiang Nan and said, "I won't forget the kindness of saving my life twice." After saying that, the 3 of them put away their water jars and walked back with 1 foot deep and 1 foot shallow. When the 3 of them were far away, Meng Dai bitterly smiled and said, "My stupid brother, you are too stupid. The 3 of them are definitely not good people, yet you insist on saving them. Alas, forget it. Who told you to be like this? However, they can escape, but we can't. We can only move forward." Dong Wushang and Ru hated Xiang Nan to the bone. Furthermore, they were locked in a chain. Perhaps they had already entered the fire-burning hell. If they went back, they would be courting death. Leave it to fate. Hopefully, there will be an exit from the Devil's Sea on the last floor. Xiang Nan picked up the Dream Butterfly and continued into the depths of the desert. The sun was like the heavens, leaving behind a string of long footprints in the vast sea of sand, but they were quickly buried by the sandstorm. The sand beneath his feet became hotter and hotter. Every step he took was like stepping on the surface of boiling magma. Xiang Nan finally couldn't stand the extreme thirst. He felt the scenery before him flicker and collapse onto the sand. Xiang Nan, wake up! Dream Butterfly woke up from her slumber. Seeing this scene, her face turned pale with fear. She cried out in alarm, "How long have you not drunk water?" Xiang Nan was half conscious and half awake, still using his hand to protect Dream Butterfly from falling to the ground, and subconsciously took out the water jar. His lips were already dry and bleeding, but he said, "Are you thirsty? Come, drink a mouthful of water." The Dream Butterfly only felt its nose ache, and with a whoosh, lay on Xiang Nan's body and cried, "If you don't drink, I won't drink." Dream Butterfly cried so hard that her heart ached. Xiang Nan lifted the hair on Dream Butterfly's face and said, "Silly girl, I have a cough, with Yuan Qi in my body, I can still hold on for a while. This Qing Shui." "Who?" "This Qing Shui is for you to save your life." "I won't." Meng Dai cried, "If you die, what's the point of me living alone? Don't say anything stupid, drink." Xiang Nan forcefully grabbed Meng Dai's head and poured 2 mouthfuls of water into her mouth. Dream Butterfly pushed away Xiang Nan's hand and kissed him as she crossed the clear water into Xiang Nan's mouth. The warm water entered his throat, causing Xiang Nan's entire body to feel rejuvenated. However, the water evaporated too quickly. In just a short while, 1/3 of it had already evaporated. Xiang Nan hurriedly put the water jar into his storage ring and sighed, "All right, if I die, you will definitely die in the desert if you don't have any strength." As he spoke, a muffled rumble suddenly came from the sand beside him. At this moment, Xiang Nan's limbs were still weak, but he forcefully stood up and carried the Dream Butterfly on his back. Then, he held a huge saber in his hand and vigilantly looked towards the direction where the voice came from. He saw a huge sandbag moving towards him from afar. "Be careful," Dream Butterfly whispered in Xiang Nan's ear. Xiang Nan grabbed the giant saber and remained motionless. He only hoped that no big monster would appear. It was best that the target of that thing was not him, but passing by him. Unfortunately, this wishful thinking was missed. When the sandbag arrived at the top 20 meters of Xiang Nan and the other 2, the sand suddenly exploded with a pu sound. In the dust, a strange fish 50 meters long jumped out. Fish? Xiang Nan and Meng Dai were stunned. Chapter 460 Lost Glory. There were actually fish in the desert. And swimming in the sand. The strange fish opened its mouth, and there were 6 rows of sharp teeth in its mouth. After the strange fish jumped up, it bit towards Xiang Nan. Xiang Nan dodged immediately and was about to slash down the huge saber at the strange fish, but he suddenly stopped the saber again. The grief of that strange fish was that there was actually a person lying on his stomach. The man had 2 shocking knife wounds on his body, and he was about to die. Put on. After the strange fish landed on the ground, it actually let out a strange sound as if it had fallen into the water. The strange fish jumped into the sand sea and rippled layer upon layer. This Xiang Nan was stunned for a moment and said, "What the hell? Put on." The strange fish swung its tail and swam around the desert before returning. It continued to jump out of the sand and nibble at Xiang Nan again. Xiang Nan kicked the strange fish in the face and knocked it to the ground. The dying man lying on the back of the fish rolled down. "Are you all right?" Xiang Nan hurriedly went over to help the man up, but when he saw the man's appearance, he sucked in a breath of cold air. This person had snake scales on his face, and his pair of eyes were crystal yellow. Demon race? Xiang Nan said. Ha! The snake demon sneered. Humans, if you want to kill, then kill. Don't hesitate, come. Xiang Nanqi said, we don't know each other. Why would I kill you? This time, it was the snake demon's turn to wonder. You're not going to kill me. Are you not human? He said. Of course I'm human. Xiang Nan frowned and helped the snake demon up, sending some 9 pure essence into his body. The snake demon was even more shocked. He didn't expect that this human would save him. Who on earth are you? Xiang Nan felt relieved when he saw that the wounds on the snake demon's body were not fatal, but that it had lost too much blood. The snake demon pondered for a moment and said, if you don't kill me, can you take me home? Xiang Nan asked carefully before realizing that the demon race belonged to the desert snake race. Xiang Nan immediately recalled that he had seen this kind of people in ancient documents. The desert snake race was a notorious existence in history. This group belonged to the top of the food chain in the entire demon race world. Especially the queen of the desert snake race. It was said that she had a pair of eyes that could petrify the world. As long as she opened her eyes and saw anyone, they would turn into stone sculptures. However, the records of the desert snake race had disappeared more than 100,000 years ago, as if the race had suddenly evaporated out of thin air. I didn't expect to see this ancient demon race again in the Devil Sea. According to the man from the snake race, 120,000 years ago, the monster race and the human race had launched a heaven-destroying war, which ended with the victory of the human race. Even so, the human race was not much better than the demon race. Both sides were injured. In that battle, the first-level Heavenly Tribulation Realm's Desert Queen was captured by a top human expert at the third level of Heavenly Tribulation. Originally, that expert wanted to execute the Desert Queen, but he moved his good intentions and threw the Desert Queen into the Devil's Sea, imprisoning her in the fire-burning hell, unable to leave for the rest of his life. Ever since then, the Desert Queen had been unable to cultivate. She had suffered all day long. In the past 120,000 years, her cultivation had deteriorated greatly, and she had no hope of leaving this place. The desert snake race was an incomparably loyal group. For the sake of the queen, they had all moved to the Demon Sea. After so many years, the desert snake race had continuously died here, and the number of their group had also dropped to the lowest point. I'm afraid that the desert snake race will be completely extinct in less than 10 years, the snake race man said with a sad laugh. Hearing this, Xiang Nan could not say how he felt. The battle between the humans and the demons had never stopped. If he had to say who was right and who was wrong, there was really no way to explain it clearly. However, even if the desert snake race were to commit a heinous crime, the 120,000 years of imprisonment would be more than enough to cancel it out. Sigh. Xiang Nan sighed and said, "How did you get hurt?" "I can take you home," the snake race man said. Hiding in the sand sea was not safe for the snake race, because there would always be humans coming here to explore the Devil Sea. At least 70% of the reason why the desert snake race had fallen into a state of near extinction was related to this. They had always been on guard against human martial artists. This time, when he came out to patrol, he was surrounded by 5 human martial artists and almost died in battle. Only then did he manage to escape by luck. "Come on up, this fish will take us back." The snake race man invited Xiang Nan and Dream Butterfly to climb onto the back of the fish. Then, the strange fish waved its tail and plunged into the desert. Xiang Nan and Dream Butterfly were both extremely surprised. When they sat on the fish, the sand turned into water. As the strange fish swam, the sand took the initiative to separate the two sides and make way for a path. Fortunately, I met a kind person like you. If it weren't for your help, I would have already died outside. The snake race man smiled weakly. Actually, I don't need you to send me back. I just want to repay you. Although our snake race is no longer as prosperous as before, I can at least give you some water. Upon hearing this, Xiang Nan instantly became spirited. The strange fish was swimming in the sand. About half an hour later, it suddenly began to descend and landed in a huge underground palace. The underground palace was large enough to be comparable to a medium-sized human city, and all the buildings in the underground palace were piled up with sand. When Xiang Nan and the others arrived, a large group of serpents rushed forward and surrounded Xiang Nan. As soon as Xiang Nan saw the realms of these snakes, he knew that they were living a miserable life. The famous desert snake race had only sent 2 or 3 Gui Yuan rank guards, and the strongest of them was only at the 5th Gui Yuan rank. Everyone, don't panic. The snake race man hurriedly waved his hand and explained, "This human saved me and sent me back. I can't trust him." A strong man from the snake race stood up and shouted, "Humans have harmed us, aren't they harming us enough? Have you forgotten how our ancestors died?" Thinking back to when our queen entered the 9 Firmaments continent alone to reconcile the conflicts between humans and demons, she was captured by despicable humans. The injured snake race man hurriedly said, "You can't say that. There are good people and bad people in the human race." Only when Xiang Nan heard what they said did he know that the desert queen had been captured like this. No wonder. In that battle, countless demons were killed and wounded, but only one peak heavenly tribulation realm great demon, the desert queen, was captured. At this point, Xiang Nan had already believed 70 to 80%. If the desert queen did not take the initiative to enter the 9 Firmaments continent, with her ability, she would definitely not end up like this. Thinking of this, Xiang Nan was moved by compassion. The injured serpent man hurriedly said, "I just brought them back to give them some water." The sturdy snake race man said angrily, "You are so foolish. You brought him back, didn't you expose our lair? He will definitely bring more humans over and capture us all in one go." Novel Empire. Immortal God of Battle.